Chairman of the Council, Matt Maguire, Vice Chairman, Woman Liz Every, and the Reverend Linda Davis.
Morning, colleagues. Could I ask you to remain standing while the Reverend Linda Davies, Rector of the Parish of Cottingham and Rampton, leads us in prayers.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many and abundant blessings, particularly as Christmas approaches.
Colleagues, the next item on the agenda is apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Bates, Costello, Fuller, Jenkins, Kindersley, Smith, Topping, Williams, Wotherspoon, Harford and Ito. Are there any other apologies I've missed, or is any of those people I've given apologies for now turned up? No? Thank you. Minutes of the 15th of October, the approval of the meetings of that council meeting. The council is asked to agree these as a correct record, subject to the addition of Councillor Wotherspoon in the list of apologies. Can I sign these as a true record? Thank you. Now going to move us on to Chairman's announcements. The Council remembers Jack Merritt and Saskia Jones, the two University of Cambridge graduates who died as a result of the terrorist attack in London on Friday, 29th of November this year. I have written on behalf of the Council to Jack's parents, as Jack was a Cambridgeshire resident, and to the University of Cambridge and Anglia Ruskin University. The Council's thoughts are also with those who were injured and the members of the public and the emergency services who prevented further loss of life. Could I ask the Council please to stand for a few moments in memory of Jack and Saskia? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A Cambridgeshire County Council team competed in the Local Authority Challenge held on the 30th of October. The team was highly commended for its interactions with the press, coming in the top 3 teams, won Best Team for Partnership Interactions, and finished in the top 5 teams of all 24 entrants. 2 social workers from Cambridgeshire have been honoured for their contribution to the profession at the National Social Worker of the Year Awards. Ella Warman and Dan Grimes, who both work for Cambridgeshire County Council, were named the winners of the newly qualified Adult Social Worker of the Year and newly qualified Children's Social Worker of the Year awards, respectively, at the prestigious event which took place on the 29th of November in London. The awards are organised by the Social Work Awards charity, which aims to improve public awareness and understanding of social work by showing the positive impact of social workers in the wide range of roles they undertake. The Social Care Recruitment Campaign has continued its winning streak by being awarded gold at the 2019 International Content Marketing Awards. See the Difference, a social care recruitment campaign for Cambridgeshire County Council, resulted in 52 new appointments, 130% ahead of its original 4-month target. Judges were wowed by the work, which involved the council working in partnership with marketing agency CPL, and voted it the best consumer campaign in a category that included shortlisted entries from companies including Tesco, Asda and Waitrose. Almost 150 agencies and companies from 23 countries entered the awards, which were held in London on Tuesday, 26th of November, and organised by the Content Marketing Association. The campaign's focus was to recruit reablement care workers, a high priority area of recruitment for the council. Reablement workers play a very valuable role in helping people to regain their independence by supporting in the community and helping them to leave hospital in timely ways and become independent again. They help people where they want to be in their own homes and avoid people having to go into care settings or receive personal care at home. More importantly, they focus on increasing confidence and independence. As well as winning at the International Content Marketing Awards, See Difference has also won awards at the Chartered Institute for Public Relations Gold Awards in 2019 and the UN Awards 2018. Now I'm going to move us on to service development. The latest milestone for Whittlesea Kingsdyke Level Crossing Scheme has been reached and a formal invitation to tender issued to 6 potential contractors. These companies, who scored highest in the initial quality assessments, now have 4 months to submit their final bids and price for building the scheme. Once the bids are received and evaluated, a final decision will be made at committee with a view to the appointed contractor starting construction by the end of 2020. Cambridgeshire County Council's new £18.3 million Alconbury Weald Civic HQ building is set to open in spring 2021. An event to mark the first spade in the ground on site took place immediately after the Commercial Investment Committee meeting held on site at the Alconbury Weald Enterprise Campus on December the 16th. This marks the start of the work that supports plans to reinvest in excess of £45 million back into valued services. On Monday, the 9th of December, a new 12-mile bypass to the south of Huntingdon opened to traffic. The new bypass runs between Ellington and Swavesey and is part of the 1.5 billion project to upgrade 21 miles of the A14 between Cambridge and Huntingdon. The existing A14 between Godmanchester at junction 24 and Spittals at junction 23 has been closed in both directions to enable work to begin on the removal of the Huntingdon Viaduct and build new link roads in the town centre. Once this work is completed in 2022, the road between Spittals and Godmanchester will reopen with links into and out of Huntingdon. I was delighted to welcome Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal on Wednesday the 16th of October when Her Royal Highness visited Hotel Chocolat in Huntingdon, where she enjoyed a tour of the facility and a taste of one of the UK's premier chocolate brands. Whilst in Cambridgeshire, the Princess Royal also visited the Museum of Armed Policing based at the Old Chatterers Police Station, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Princess Anne ended her visit to Cambridgeshire with a visit to Corcus Crisps at Willow Farm in Little Downham, near Ely, where Her Royal Highness also presented long service certificates to members of staff. On the 29th of October, I joined the welcoming party when His Royal Highness the Duke of York visited the new Civil Engineering Building and National Research Facility for Infrastructure Sensing. Colleagues, at the end of this meeting today, when Council rises, we will not be having our usual carol service, because as you would appreciate, with the meeting having to be postponed till today, none of our music service people are available to us, but we also have other meetings which will be going on this afternoon. However, there will be a collection at the end of the meeting outside the chamber for my chosen charity, which is the East Anglia Children's Hospice. So I do hope, colleagues, you'll feel able to dig deep. Thank you. move on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest which they feel they need to declare today? Councillor Schumann.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to declare an interest on agenda item number 6, the Treasury Management Report. It refers to Viva Arts and Community Group's loan to a non-profit organisation. I'm a trustee of the Arts and Community Group. It is on my declaration form, but I don't think it precludes me from voting, but I just wish to highlight it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Chairman. I don't believe it does. Right. We'll now move on to public question time. We have no questions from the public on this occasion. I'm moving now on to petitions, and again, we have no petitions. So, if I may, just move us on. I'll just borrow your copy of the... sorry, it's all done that. Right. Item 6 is an item for determination from the General Purposes Committee. Treasury Management Report, Quarter 2 update. Councillor Count, I understand you're going to introduce this report.
Yes, I shall move the report, Chairman.
Do you have a seconder?
Chairman, I so second and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
You go green. Thank you, Chairman. Introducing the Treasury Management Report, Quarter 2 Update 2019-20. There are only 3 things I want to bring to your attention. The first was on the 9th of October, the Public Works Loan Board raised their interest rates unexpectedly from 1% to 2%, which is covered in the report and is quite a change to how we normally see things and how we see things operate. So I just want to draw your attention to that. I want to draw your attention to paragraph 3.7, where this council utilised £100 million, transferred £100 million of its loan facility, utilising the PWLB resource just before then in September, which turned out to be an extremely timely move. Immense credit to the team that handles this, and very much in line with the things we've been saying at GPC, that we needed to move some of our short-term debt into long-term debt, and we did very nicely on that day. Thank you to the team. The only other thing I wish to mention on the report is obviously this was written a while ago, went to the November GPC committee, so a lot of the commentary that revolves around uncertainty in the markets, some of that uncertainty has been resolved by the fact that there's been a general election, but obviously there are other uncertainties still in there, but perhaps slightly different uncertainties regarding what might happen with Brexit. So we know it's going to happen now, but it's a different uncertainty now. So some of the context in the report will be outdated, and of course we will take a new position as and when the latest iteration comes out. So that's all I've got to say. I'm happy to take any questions and catch them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shellings.
Thank you, Chairman. Given the results from last week, to which Councillor Count alluded briefly, the pound has started to fall. Given the anticipated situation, we are expecting there to be sustained fall. We are expecting there to be sustained damage to our balance of payments, and that will lead to higher interest rates. Councillor Count has already referred to the very beneficial securing of £100 million of cheap, low interest rate money. Given the outlook and the prospects for the future, does he think that's enough?
Councillor Ickford, you've reserved your right to speak. Do you wish to say anything? Councillor Count?
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Shellings. I haven't been keeping an eye, day-to-day eye on the sterling market since the election results. I know that they went up considerably over the pre-election period when it was predicted that it was going in a certain direction for the election result. And I know that overnight after the election result, there was a massive increase in the value of sterling. Since then, I'm aware it's been falling, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't know where it is at the moment, definitely, but it's certainly higher than it was maybe a year ago. So unless you have different information to me, I don't know. The actual opinion that you know, the town is going to have a sustained fall is your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. You may even have some people that share that opinion with you. You know, we've seen so many opinions over the last three years. What I tend to do for the purposes of this report is rely on the expert opinion as and when it comes to fruition in the document and then report that to you. So, for example, whilst I highlighted that there was uncertainty, some uncertainties were resolved, such as there was an election result, I didn't stand here and tell the Remainers that they were wrong, we're going to come out of Brexit, everything will be rosy. I simply left that open-ended and wait for the experts to feed that in. I'm sure that we're in a very good position in this council to weather any of the fluctuations, and there are many, many people that believe that the outcomes of the election and the Brexit process is a very positive one and will do good for the economy. Perhaps based on the election results, I might even hedge a bet and say that there were more of them that felt that way than against. But I shall leave that to the experts to define. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Kent. I have no other speakers. Oh, Councillor Shelling, do you wish to speak again in the debate? You don't have that opportunity. This isn't a motion. This isn't a back and forward. Sorry, Councillor Shelling, you've made your point and Councillor Kent has responded to it. I would like now to move to the vote on acceptance of this report. Can I do this by a show of hands, please? Are those in favour of accepting the report? Anybody against? Any abstentions? No, I think that was carried by unanimous decision. Thank you. We now moved to item 7, proposed revisions to part 3 of the Council's Constitution. Can I ask the Chairwoman of the Constitution and Ethics Committee, Councillor Every, to move the recommendations as set out in the report? Councillor Every.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry. The original recommendations was to approve 2 amendments to the Constitution. Firstly, the membership of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and secondly, the scheme of delegation to officers. Both are itemised on page 10 of your report. As you're aware, changes to the Constitution have to be agreed at full council, and recommendations are brought forward, normally from the Constitution and Ethics Committee. Given the recent circumstances where meetings have had to be postponed, with only this item on the agenda, it was agreed not to hold the last Constitution and Ethics meeting and to bring the report direct to the full council. However, I understand that there are some concerns about the second item, the scheme of delegation to officers. And in view of this, I'm proposing that we defer this second item so that it can be discussed at the next Constitution and Ethics Committee, which will be held on the 14th of January. And only deal here with the first item, the membership of the Health and Wellbeing Board. You will all be aware of an email that has come circulated to you regarding this second item. And all I'm asking that in view of this, we change our constitution in order to reflect the decisions that have been made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Every. I believe you have a second. Is it Councillor Reynolds and you intend to second? Both. And presumably you're seconding the proposal to refer the second item back to...
I thought I'd indicated to speak, Chairman.
Oh, that's popped up now. And Chairman and stuff to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say briefly that I believe at least some members are aware of the concerns that my group has raised about the second item of these changes, and I'm grateful that they have been referred to, or are proposed to be referred to Constitution and Ethics Committee so that those concerns can be addressed. There is, in our view, a lack of clarity around some of these proposals, which, you know, we hope will be clarified at the committee meeting, and that there will be a chance to air the concerns that have been raised and resolve them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Councillor Reynolds, do you wish to speak, or you reserved your right, but do you wish to speak to the item?
No, Chairman, I do not wish to add anything further.
Thank you. In that case, colleagues, I'll move to a vote on the proposal from Constitution and Ethics. Can I do this by show of hands again? Those in favour? Anybody against? No? Any abstentions? No, thank you for that. The next item is item 8, Draft Climate Change and Environment Strategy. Can I ask the Chairman of the General Purposes Committee, Councillor Count, to move that the recommendations as set out in the report be adopted? You have a seconder? Councillor Schumann? Thank you. Councillor Count, you wish to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chairman, and probably remiss of me. I haven't said Merry Christmas to everybody, but this will be the last meeting I think we'll see. So whilst I get an opportunity, I'm on my feet. Merry Christmas to everyone. I'd like to thank this council, firstly, for unanimously supporting the motion I brought forward in May on behalf of the Conservative group regarding this strategy this year. So thank you to this council. And secondly, I'd like to thank the officer Cheryl French. I don't know if she's here today. Thanks, Cheryl. But, you know, leading your team and your officers and your work on this, it's been a truly good piece of work. I want you to pass on my thanks, and probably the entire council's thanks, to that team and to yourself for the incredible work that you've done steering the motion into the draft strategy in front of us today. Thirdly, I'd like to thank Ian Manning and the Cusby research team to actually putting the backbone, the scientific evidence, the carbon footprint, Cambridgeshire and the Carbon Net Zero project. By approaching this project in this manner, this has given us a firm footing in terms of credibility with both the scientific and the environmentalist community. So I'd like to thank all those that are involved. And if I've missed anyone that's involved in this superb piece of work, then it's by omission and not deliberate. And I'd like to thank them as well. Where we are today is at the draft stage to approve a strategy, an action plan, an annual carbon footprint for public consultation. I know that in this document, and the officers know in this document, there are some gaps, such as in the carbon footprint. But none of these gaps, whether it be in the action plan or in the carbon footprint, are hidden or obscured. They're obvious and there for all to see. And we have action plans for how to address them and move forward with them in the future, because this is the starting step, shall we say, and there is no intention from us to hide away from our responsibilities towards looking after environment. As part of our ongoing plans, a transformation bid will be coming to GCP in January of next year for a climate change officer, and their role will be to enable the organisation to deliver the commitments in the action plan from April 2020, and they'll sit in the energy investment unit. I think it would be remiss of me when we see so many people up and down the country having their strategies and action plans announced and declaring climate emergencies. It would be remiss of me not to mention the work that we did before we got here, because for some people this is literally their first step. But for us, we're actually on a journey where we've made considerable progress over the years. For example, we've already put £22 million into reducing carbon emissions. £22 million. We've already put a further £56 million committed into our business plan. We've done things like plant 25,000 trees and have a plastic strategy, a waste strategy, a flood strategy, a you know, we have done a huge amount of work already, but this is bringing it all together and moving us forwards. You know, we've been recognised as an exemplar in various international well-credited websites, and we've won Energy Efficiency Award, a very illustrious one. So there's a lot that we should already be proud about, but I want to say to you quite clearly, we're Cambridgeshire. We're Cambridgeshire. We don't look at the past and just sit on our laurels. It would be very easy for Cambridge University to say we've been #1 or thereabouts for the last 400 years, but they don't. And just like us, we drive forward towards the future. And this is how we're going to do it. This is how Cambridgeshire is going to move forwards on the environmental and the climate change strategy to deliver an environment and a climate that we can pass on to our children that we'll be happy with. So I commend this to you. I know that there are some small gaps in there, but if we all work together, this will actually have the desired effect that we all want, and that's to have a great future for our families and our children. I commend this to the council. Thank you.
Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to start by thanking 3 members of this authority. I want to thank firstly Councillor Susan van der Ven, without whose dogged intervention and determination 6 months ago, moving 2 amendments at the full council meeting, this council would not have declared a climate emergency. I want to thank Councillor Linda Jones, who has been, along with myself, the other regular attender on the Climate Change Working Group, and it has been a real pleasure to work with Linda on much of this. And I want also to thank Councillor Ian Manning also for the work of the Cuspy initiative, which has done so much to inform this. I want to add my thanks to the leaders, to Cheryl French, who has done an incredibly impressive job on this, and also to Sarah Wilkinson and the rest of Cheryl's team, who have worked enormously hard on this draft document and action plan. And I would like to thank the students from Cuspy, who have given us so much information and so much insight to work with. This is a strategy for the county council, rather than for the county, and it is explicit about that. It's about what we can control and what we can influence rather than for the county more widely. And that is right, but it also indicates in the strategy and in the action plan the need to work effectively in partnership with other tiers of government and with local residents and businesses. The vast majority of carbon emissions in Cambridgeshire are outside that scope and need active intervention by others. Recognition of the climate emergency is growing across Cambridgeshire at every level of local government, from parish councils and district councils as far as this council. But unfortunately no further, because the combined authority is the only tier not to have declared a climate emergency. As the combined authority is responsible for transport, which contributes 39% of Cambridge's emissions, and housing growth, which is also a huge contributor, this is something on which the leader of the council, as our representative, needs to continue to press the mayor. The recommendation before us today is that we should approve the strategy, action plan and annual carbon footprint for public consultation. I look forward to what I hope will be a robust challenge from Cambridgeshire residents, encouraging us to be ambitious in what we seek to achieve. In the last year, we've seen rapid development of local activity, including especially the creation of online eco-groups in places like Ely, in my own village of Sutton, and elsewhere. Residents are encouraging themselves and each other to grapple with the environmental challenge. There is much more to be done, and the working group will resume its meetings, the officer group and also the member steering group, in the new year to consider the public's input to this strategy and to add more detailed targets and way stages to the draft plan we have today. I look forward to that work, and in the meantime, I encourage members here today to support the strategy before us as a basis for that public discussion and the large amount of further work that we all know is very much needed on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Councillor van der Ven.
I don't touch anything, do I? Right. Thank you, Chairman. It seems an appropriate moment to consider the quiet but powerful role that active travel can and must play in the way that we get around, and the effectiveness of the Junior Travel Ambassador Scheme funded by Public Health, which is thriving across Cambridgeshire primary schools. And this involves appointing Year 5 pupils as leaders and ambassadors in choosing walking, scootering, cycling and public transport to school, enabling them to reduce their own carbon footprints, but also influencing the behavior of their family and, as they would say, their best friends, and also improving their own physical and mental health. I just thought I'd pull up the list of those schools participating at the moment, and there's a waiting list across the county, but we have Ashbeach, All Saints March, Alderman Jacobs, Bar Hill, Barrington, Barnabas Oley, Caldecott, Ditton Lodge, Elm Road, Wisbeach, Fourfields, Yaxley, Fordham, Gamlingay, Godmanchester, Great Abingdon, Hoxton, Holme, Holywell, Ilam, Meldreth, Melbourne, St. John's, St. Peter's, St. Lawrence, St. Luke's, St. Mary's, St. Neots, The Shade, Thorndown, and University of Cambridge Primary. So those are all schools where this project is thriving. And I hope very much that this is a scheme that within the climate change and environment strategy can be expanded. It costs very little, it's at capacity, it's being run with real passion by Mary Richards, who has a waiting list. Unfortunately, won't be able to engage with any of the schools wishing to take part. So I hope if we have a little bit of wriggle room in the coming year that this is something we can develop for the sake of all children in Cambridgeshire. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Well, like others, I'd like to welcome the strategy and congratulate the team, Cheryl, and a huge team of officers across the council. I was part of the members' advisory group in relation to the strategy, but we went to a couple of meetings early on with about 30 officers in the room, all trying to work together to a hugely tight timescale, and that's the other thing about it. It's not just pulling in all sorts of material from all over the place, including the excellent Cuspy work, but also working to a very, very tight timescale. I'll just pay in passing tribute to the work of Stuart Keeble on air quality, which you'll notice on page 66 apart from anything else, useful set of targets, I think, in paragraph 211, although not all of them have got target dates. I think it's good to have brought together what essentially is human health and climate change, and to remind ourselves that public health, human health, is a critical part of dealing with climate change. The other important issue in this strategy, I think, is collaboration. The message here is, and it's been made by Councillor Dupre, that the County Council itself can influence some things, some of the Scope 1 and the Scope 2, but in terms of a huge amount of work, it's got to indirectly influence others. And that, I think, is where we get past the strategy and onto the really hard work, which is how do we create those influences? How do we create those levers? I notice on page 102, for example, it talks about influencing the health sector. Well, we all know the state that the health sector is at the moment, scrambling to stay on top of what it's dealing with in terms of patients. So turning the health sector's mind and helping them along is going to be important. And we need resources and support to do that work. Page nearer home, by the way, on page 101, it talks about transport and the way that we will make people more healthy and more resistant to climate change by adaptation through more walking and cycling. Well, I don't know about any other parts of the county, but I certainly know in Cambridge, the conditions for walking and cycling are deteriorating massively. We have huge numbers of potholes, we have pavements that are falling apart, I have trips and falls reported to me. We are not going to get people walking more and cycling more if we don't have decent local environments. So the big challenge to me seems to be collaboration and finding ways to support individuals and communities to do this. This does take resources. It is not a resource-free zone. And I think that those who have put this strategy together need to go to the next stage of thinking about how we actually deliver it.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Whitehead.
There's an enormous amount of work here that's been extremely valuable, and I've always enjoyed and found informative the seminars that Cheryl and her team have run. I want to follow a little bit on the theme that Councillor Jones has raised and looking at transport. Because this again is an issue where we do need to collaborate. We're going to do something about transport, both with the combined authority and with the district councils. There are two things that I want to say about that. There was a very interesting article in the newspaper by an environmentalist and engineer, pointing out that people somehow think electric cars are a great panacea. That as long as we're all driving electric cars, it'll be all right. And that it doesn't matter if we've got congestion in the cities, as long as they're congested with electric cars and not polluting cars. And of course, that really doesn't solve the problem and goes back to the point that Councillor Jones has made about the environment. And I think the big difficulty with public transport is it's going to require huge upfront investment. You are not going to get people out of their cars unless there is a good public transport system. And as we know, particularly out in the rural areas of Cambridgeshire, a public transport system is a distant memory. Therefore, it seems to me that there has to be huge investment in getting the buses running and regularly running and running on time before you're going to be able to persuade people to get out of their cars and not drive into places. And the enormous investment there really is enormous, and I really feel we need to look at that. Because we cannot tackle the people driving everywhere unless we can reinstate a serious, efficient, well-organised and affordable public transport system. And I say what concerns me is how much upfront investment that is going to need, and it probably means running services at a loss for a particular period of time until you can persuade people to use them. It can be done. It was done, for example, in the city of Sheffield, where they made public transport system interlink the buses and the trains, and they made it affordable, and it got rid of cars in the city centre. The introduction of deregulation and competition meant that that disappeared. And so it is about collaboration, but it's also about huge upfront investment. And we really do need, as Councillor Jones said, for the next thing to look at that investment and to recognise that we're probably going to have to run public services at a loss for a period until we can persuade people that they really are back and up and running. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Bailey.
I just wanted to draw members' attention to the work that in fact is going on at the Combined Authority, because Councillor Dupre was rather pointed in her criticism of the Combined Authority. And in fact, at the last board meeting, the board unanimously agreed to and approved an independent commission on climate change to be headed up by Professor Ian Leslie from Cambridge University to look at decarbonisation of the economy across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and do what it can to recommend measures to mitigate climate change and adaptation measures. And the proposal is that it will run on a similar model to the very successful independent economic review report, which was held up as a model across the country. So it's a similar approach, and it was unanimously supported at the last board. So I think it's rather churlish to criticise the Combined Authority in such a pointed manner. And I did also just want to thank Councillor Steve Count, who I noticed was omitted from the list of thanks made earlier.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. If anybody was just listening into this debate, you'd think that all the good thoughts and all the concerns came from that side of the room and they didn't come from us. And I noticed Councillor Whitehead was talking about running a bus service at a loss and then eventually turning it into a break-even. Well, if she wants to come and visit Ely or Wilburton, I'll show her how the zipper works. It costs 150 to 160,000 a year. We've managed to get the net cost down to about £20,000 now, and we're providing a service that people want and love and use, and therefore it can be. So we'll tell you how to do it and show you an example of how it's doing and how it's doing well. So I agree with you. And also collaboration is something which one of the members from that side of the chamber talked about, and of course it's right. But we don't make a big fuss about working with Highways England and ensuring that there's 600,000 trees going to be planted along the A14. We just get on and do it. So I just don't want there to be any confusion that we're all working together with climate change. We're all trying, but we're not using it in a weaponised way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I have no other speakers shown. So, Councillor Schumann, do you wish to exercise your right to respond?
Very briefly, you'll be pleased to know, Chair. Just to point members' attention to, and it has been referenced, 2.4 in the covering report and 2.2 in the strategy document highlighting the objections which will underpin our work, and although the document is focused specifically on looking inward and how we as a council will meet those targets, we can't forget the way that we will lead by example and provide direction for others. Councillor Jones raised the challenge of how we will influence and support others to reduce their own carbon footprint, and particularly the health sector. And although I agree this presents a challenge, the message in the report is clear. None of us can afford not to address this issue, both in terms of health impacts and the financial impact it will have on us all. My only last point, Chairman, is to make the reference at 2.11 in the report, where we set out some very ambitious targets, which are both ambitious and realistic. The strategy is founded on sound research, and particular thanks have been already mentioned twice to Cheryl and the team, and particularly the CUSPI researchers, who have done a fantastic job in helping us form this strategy. Founded on clear research and clearly identifies the imperative need to take action and highlights just how we will do it. I would urge all members to support this strategy and send a clear message, as we did back in May, that highlighting our commitment to tackling the greatest challenge of our time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann. Councillor Count, do you wish to sum up from the debate?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a lot of those kind comments and positive contributions to the debate taking place today. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of points. Councillor Bailey mentioned that the fact that the Combined Authority has commissioned agreed a budget, I think it was £123,000 for a commission on climate change. But I was also disappointed in the sort of mild attack that went then, because at the last council meeting, the question was, you know, can Steve Count talk to the mayor about having a climate emergency? And the response was circulated to members that the mayor was commissioning this, and he would wait to see how he can be of maximum use in this field when he gets that report back. And as that was circulated to members before today's council meeting, I felt that that sort of mention was a bit unwelcome. In terms of thanks, I missed one. Sorry, it was in my notes. But the cross-party environment advisory support group, I wanted to thank them as well. And it is important that we recognise we're all in this together. I know Councillor Bailey mentioned that Councillor Dupré did not mention me for bringing forward this motion, or thanking the Conservative group for supporting this and bringing it forward. And even though it's Christmas, I understand that. You know, it's a step too far. Okay, two of the things that I really want to talk about is let's talk about the future here and future transport. Some people believe that subsidising buses and having them run around the country, electric or otherwise, is a great idea. I personally, I'm a very keen advocate of the CAM Metro. The difference between the buses and the CAM Metro is they are travelling primarily on congested roads, whereas the CAM Metro is a new solution, fully electric, fully green. So I'm very much more in favour of that. But we have to do something in the here and now, and I do follow that. And I do think we have to work together towards a solution. It was mentioned that the officers had to work to a very tight timescale. Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because when we introduce motions and it's saying it's an emergency and it's going to be till November before we bring back the draft strategy, we're criticised because we're not treating it as an emergency. We're not working hard enough. But we made it very clear that the depth of commitment we were giving was an all-encompassing strategy that was credible and based on an evidence factual basis. We could have rushed into this and just said declaring a climate emergency and rubber-stamped a document through that really didn't do very much. But we wanted to get this right, and it's a real credit to the team and the advisory group and all those who worked on this to actually pull together such a pool of evidence and custody that we can sit and send out to the public now today. So it was an ambitious and tight timescale, but I make no apologies for that. I'm just proud of all of those that were involved in it. Disappointed to hear from the opposition the discussion about potholes and things are getting worse. So the first thing I'd like to remind the opposition members is the Conservative amendments to the budgets have put more into the highways than the other parties have over the last 3 to 4 years. All right, you have your chance at budget time, and each and every year we put in more than you, and yet you have the temerity to moan about it. And I'd also like to comment that a direct reference was made to Cambridge. Cambridge is the '1 city in the UK for travelling to work by foot or by cycle. It is almost double the percentage of its nearest rival. That is largely due to the work that the County Council has done over the last 10 to 20 years in actually prioritising pedestrian and cycleways. You cannot argue with facts. We are almost double, and just because I enjoy doing it so much, our nearest rival is Oxford. Just as a matter of note, last week we repaired 1,197 potholes. They are going down because we have used an asset management strategy, so it's actually the structure of the roads that we want to concentrate on, and potholes are a necessity because they're not good enough yet. But we concentrate most of our finance on bringing the core structure of the roads and pavements up to start. Priority lanes. The one thing we have to do with buses, which we are doing with our partners, the Combined Authority and the GCP at the moment, is we have to, at this present point in time, create bus priority lanes, all right? Because that is one of the ways that you get people to come out of their cars and into buses, because they know they can get in and out of places like the city centre faster. So that's work going on at the moment, and I'm very pleased to be working alongside the GCP and that on those things that are making a very credible difference. So that's the end of my talk on the subject. I'm sorry I've taken so much time. I recommend this to Council, and thank you to everybody involved in this.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. That was spot on, and well done to the Light Blues. I believe we can now move to the vote, and hopefully we can do this simply by a show of hands. So those in favour of the report as presented? Anybody against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Noted. Thank you. The vote is carried. Next is item 9, delegation of County Council energy performance enforcement powers to district councils. Can I ask Councillor Count to move that recommendation as set out in the report and that it be adopted? Councillor Count. Do you have a seconder?
Chairman, I so second and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Count, do you wish to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Before I introduce, or as part of introducing the report, I want to draw everybody's attention to the recommendations. The third recommendation, it says, delegates to Cambridgeshire District Councils the 2012 regulations. I believe that should read, delegates to Cambridgeshire District Councils and Cambridge City Council the 2012 regulations. So if that's acceptable to everybody, if that's acceptable to everybody, I shall carry on with that addition. This is basically a proposal for us to delegate some of our powers to do with trading standards regarding energy performance certificates, EPCs, regarding substandard rental properties to the districts and Cambridge City Council. Because of a technicality, we're in with Peterborough, we've got to take it back from Peterborough, we'll give it out to those districts and city that want it, and those that don't want it, we'll put back to Peterborough City Council. That's encapsulated in the report. I don't need to go into that in detail. The backbone of the report is the fact that substandard properties, E or less, we don't, as a county council, have regular occurrences to go in and out of people's properties, but districts and the city, through their relationships in the housing, they do. So the request has come into us, wouldn't it make more sense for those people that want it, that are actually interlocked into that system, be able to utilise it, for us to delegate to them? It seems totally rational to us. It's been through the committee, so therefore that's what we're proposing today. So therefore I recommend this paper as it stands with that minor adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. I'm sure that minor adjustment has been noted, although I have to say from the Chair, I'm slightly surprised I didn't take part in any debate on that, but as far as I've always understood, Cambridge City Council was one of our district councils, but nevertheless. I've got no other names. Oh, yes, I have now. Councillor Hoy, you wish to speak?
Yeah, just very briefly, just to say that I think this is a really good scheme. When I first read the paper, I was disappointed that it suggested that any district that didn't want to take this up, it would be Peterborough City Council that then took it up for them. Because I was thinking, hey, why do Peterborough get to have the fine income? But actually, when I thought it through, I thought, well, actually, why would any district not take it up? Because it'd be pretty silly of them not to do that, because obviously they can levy fines, and in Fenland we will be doing, so I fully support this.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. Councillor Hickford, do you wish to exercise your right to speak?
Just very briefly, Chairman, for me this is a question of capacity, and the authority is best placed to deliver, and that will be the districts and the City Council in this case. Thank you.
You, Councillor Hickford. Councillor Kent, do you wish to say anything further in summing up?
Nothing to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. In that case, I'll move to the vote. Again, by show of hands, all in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? No? Then the report is carried. Item 10 is the Shire Hall site, an application for a definitive map modification order to register a public footpath. Can I ask the Chairman of the Highways and Infrastructure Committee, Councillor Shooter, to move the recommendation as set out in the report that be adopted? Councillor Shooter. Can you have a seconder? Councillor Hunt is seconding it. And Councillor Hunt, can I assume you're reserving your right to speak? I can. Thank you. Councillor Shooter, can you introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is to delegate the Council's function to process and determine the application for a definitive map modification order to register a public footpath at the Shire Hall site. So this is very similar to the, I think it was at the last council meeting where we asked Suffolk County Council to look in and determine, in respect to the green space in front of Shire Hall, the potential for a village green there. This is for a footpath, so it's a similar type of situation. That's subject to Suffolk County Council accepting the delegation. Full council delegates to Suffolk County Council the processing and determination of the application for a definitive map modification order to require, to register a public footpath at the Shire Hall site. So, subject to them accepting it, this is the recommendation. It's for all the reasons that were set out prior to that on the village green. They can determine the thing, and the expected cost is circa £30,000. That builds in some leeway for legal costs, etc. So that's the proposal.
You, Councillor Shooter. Councillor Richards.
Thank you. Before I make some points about the delegation of this application to Suffolk County Council to register a public footpath on the Shire Hall site, I want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to the group who are putting in the application for the footpath and to offer the application my support. Does I feel an important right of way in my division? They've been lobbying, working since the get-go to retain Shire Hall in public ownership and for free and open access in perpetuity to the mound and grassed forecourt to the historic Shire Hall monument site. For many reasons, I mentioned a few, including our collective history, our community and our health and well-being. I've spoken before about the importance of the site for our collective history, seat of local government that owns a narrative of harsher days, of a jail and a dark justice system. The mound, which is an important green space for Cambridgeshire and for the local community, where people worship, come together, celebrate and pass the everyday in a workaday world. We've talked about the importance of green spaces today and air pollution today. Some of my residents who live locally and do not have a garden come here to walk their dogs, picnic and so on. In a city where green spaces are not always open to the general public, let's ensure this green space will be open to all for generations to come. Councillor Scott and I, together with Councillor Thornbury, Executive Councillor for Planning, Policy and Open Spaces, have registered an application to make the mound and the grassed forecourt Shire Hall Historic Monument site a town green. And I welcome this application for a public footpath to protect public access, free and open in perpetuity. A resident recently drew my attention to Sarah Payne's book Down My Street, which writes about a visit to the mound in the immediate vicinity, tells of its stories, its history, and of the experience. I'm going to read from page 8 of her book, Down My Street, from the section entitled Castle Street, dated February the 5th, 1981. Chin up Castle Mound, the site of the old Norman castle or moat, on one of these crisp, dry winter mornings that we have been having, and you'll be rewarded for the effort. From our local Everest, you can daydream yourself over the spires and chapels to Oxford, 66.5 miles away. Or if you're in a Dick Whittington fame of mine, to Charing Cross, a mere 57.5 miles away. The Noble Ordnance Survey plaque sited on top of the mound swings you round to all points of the compass. It reminds you that you're 107 feet and a half feet above sea level. Local legend has it that there is no higher ground between the mound and the North Pole. If you stand there peering across to Chesterton, which is a thrilling bit of fantasy to indulge in, let's keep that opportunity open to all. I appreciate we need a neutral body, but and if this is to be the decision, then for this and as the Village Green application, then it really must be ensured that local people can access the consultation. Public meetings and so on and so forth are held locally for all who choose to attend and to engage. Opportunities for genuine local engagement. Thank you.
Councillor Richards, Councillor Whitehead.
I've got one small comment. As Councillor Shooter pointed out, we did delegate to Suffolk looking at the issue of the town green, which we agreed to pay them £30,000. And we're now looking at a public footpath and saying £30,000. It seems to me many of those aspects overlap. And I wondered if we have scope for negotiating a deal with them about this, perhaps 2 for 1, or some, as there will be overlap. Perhaps we could try that, Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Harrison.
In fact, when you press my button, it's not really necessary for me to speak, because Councillor Richard has put very well what I would agree with and thoroughly support. But actually, I must admit, I was very, very sorry to see the sniggering and laughing over in that side of the room when Councillor Richards just took a little bit of a second to actually just celebrate what is an important part of our county. It's not something to be sneered at just because you don't come from Cambridge. Actually, we can all just listen and remember that this was the seat of local government for a long time. Here it is a big historic site. It doesn't need to be sneered over when Councillor Richards is just reading a little bit of something from literature and from history, just for our, entertainment and enlightenment in this pre-Christmas meeting over a matter which is very important to some of us.
Councillor Scott.
I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Richard has said and what Councillor Harrison has said right now, and to say that, yes, everything that Councillor Richard has said is absolutely vital, and I want to add to it as well the cut-through from McGrath Avenue through to the Mound, as well as to Huntingdon Road and Castle Street. This is why this application from the Ramblers is so absolutely vital and important. There are so many people who do come from all around Cambridgeshire, as well as from around the world, to the Mound and to the green space. And they come locally as well, as Councillor Richards has said, within her division. But the point about it is too that those who are coming from that side of the area through the cut-through come up to the Mound that way. So I just want to re-emphasise a point that has been made time and again, that the cut-through is absolutely vital too. But again, I'd simply say that the Ramblers have put in an application that really this council should be supporting, just as the council should be supporting the application for the town green rather than sending it off to somebody else to make the decision. The decision really should be made here, and the decision should be a popular one, a positive one in terms of both applications. Thank you.
Councillor Scott. Councillor Schumann.
Thank you, Chairman. Some local members seem hell-bent on propagating the lie that there is any intention to not retain the Mound and public ownership and the surrounding land. I would ask local members to do all they can to ensure local residents are not further misinformed and scaremongering is stopped. Perhaps a reminder of our commitment yet again to ensure that there will be free and unfettered access to the Mound and surrounding green, and that we will continue to work with Trinity College to ensure the footpath is retained and remains open to the public at all times. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is, I think, a case of weaponising something and just seeing this as a potential twig to hit the Conservatives with. Our group here is as committed to the retention of the mound and the footpath up it as any group of people in this country could be. I can't prove it documentarily, but I believe my ancestors actually stood on the mound and looked over to Ely with a certain amount of envy and said they wanted to get there so they could get rid of Hereward. And so I can claim that 900 or 1,000 years of my family have been concerned with that mound. That mound is important. We have always said it's important. We've always said it is not in doubt. It's a little bit like, sort of, isn't it? Oh, they're going to sell the health service or something like that. It's a ridiculous comment. We cherish it. It has a vast importance historically, and it also has a vast importance as a facility for local people and visitors. What we're doing here is a sort of belt and braces to make quite sure that the people who are concerned or just trying to find something to criticise us for we're protecting it. We're putting it in the hands of a third party to eliminate any possible doubt that it's safe. So you needn't worry. It's going to be safe for the people, and we're going to make sure it happens. We are the Conservative Party, and we want to conserve it. Thank you.
To the Councillor Hunt. Councillor Shooter, do you wish to sum up on the debate?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd just like to address the matter of cost. That is up to 30,000. It doesn't mean to say we're automatically going to spend 30,000. It's built in as a contingency in case there may be legal challenges or various other things. So obviously we hope it comes in considerably less than that, but they are two distinctly separate applications, which is why it is correct to put in an estimated up to cost, but that's the matter. And I would just like to say, if there was any, certainly sniggering, as was put from my point of view, it was in respect of the legend, because we clearly understand now that the legend is not true. In fact, where I live is at 228 feet above sea level, so it's considerably higher than the Castle Mound. Now, legends were created when they thought that the world was flat, not round. And so it is, you know, it's a legend, and that's all. It's not one I'd heard before, and I think it was a rather amusing idea that it could be, you could see all the way to the North Pole from it. So that was the only amusement from my point of view. So, thank you.
Explanation I think I am entitled to, as the comment that I am entitled to indeed. And I just would want to say that I was certainly not referring to Councillor Shooter's sneering.
The speaker is working, so it was okay. I'd now like to move to the vote on the debate. Again, I think we can do this by a show of hands. I'm sure everybody's in favour of the public footway. So, all those in favour? Anybody against? Abstentions? No, that is carried. The next item on the agenda is item 11, which is appointment to outside bodies. I propose to move, as chairman, the recommendation as set out in the report, with the addition of replacing Councillor Nieto as a substitute on the Combined Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee with myself. Can I ask the Vice Chairman, Councillor Every, if you would be pleased to second that proposal?
Happy to second, Chair.
Do they wish to speak? So I'll simply move to a vote on those appointments. Everybody in favour, please show. Anybody against? Abstentions? No. We now move to item 12, written motions, not emotions. Two motions have been submitted. The first motion has been submitted by Councillor Scott. Can I ask Councillor Scott to move and speak to her motion as set out on pages 4 and 5 of the council agenda? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. Perhaps I should say that Councillor Richards is the seconder of the motion.
I appreciate that. I would have been asking you, once you proposed your motion, who your seconder was.
Right,
Thank you.
The Chief Executive of Early Education has said, maintained nursery schools are the highest performing part of our education system, with the majority of nursery schools serving some of the most deprived communities. They achieve outstanding results. 98% of nursery schools are judged outstanding or good by Ofsted, and indeed Ofsted rates 63% of nursery schools as outstanding and 35% as good. 65% of nursery school places are located in 30% of the most deprived parts of England. Here in Cambridge and Cambridgeshire, we certainly have deprived areas. And although Cambridge, for example, is seen as a gifted city, it has its very own disadvantaged areas. And we as Labor recognise as well the disadvantage of areas outside Cambridge City, within Cambridgeshire, that also ought to have access to the maintained nursery schools. Occasional paper, What Role Do Maintained Nursery Schools Play in Early Years Sector Improvements, by Solverson, Webb and Sutton Sang, says that these maintained nursery schools attend unremittingly to the needs of children within the context of their families and communities. They provide links to the wider services, support services, where they exist. We know too well that there are too few support services, which means that even more maintained nursery schools must be maintained. That was my interjection. I go on to quote from Solverson, Webb and Sutton Sang. Without sufficient funding to support current child and family requirements, and with continuing uncertainties about future government fiscal settlements beyond 2020, the future of the remaining 392 maintained nursery schools throughout the country cannot be guaranteed. Now, we have maintained nursery schools within Cambridge, and sadly, because of the funding situation, their continuance cannot be guaranteed. One of the respondents to the consultation that was run by Solverson, Webb and Sutton Sang says, we, the providers in these maintained nursery schools, have a commitment and dedication to providing an inspirational, life-changing start to children and families in our communities. These maintained nursery schools provide specialised education, and that requires professionals to work within the area. There is a distinction between simple childcare and the services that are provided by maintained nursery schools, and it is specialised educational provision to children, including in particular a large number of children with special educational needs and children with a disability. These maintained nursery schools are absolutely essential in terms of the recognition that children between 0 and 5 or 6 years require solid access to educational provision such as is provided by maintained nursery schools. The point is that if those nursery schools are not there providing the services that they do, children are hugely disadvantaged, and the inequality that exists within Cambridge and Cambridgeshire, and indeed within the United Kingdom as a whole, will be continued. And we have to recognise that it's absolutely detrimental to those children themselves, to the future generations. It's detrimental to our communities, it's detrimental to families, and in the end, if we want to look at it from a money point of view, it's actually detrimental to the society as a whole, because if this education is not provided, then that means that those children don't have the educational opportunities they have for the future. They don't have the opportunities to gain professional training, to gain trade training, and so on. And I just mention here as a final point, the Prime Minister, when he was asked, the current Prime Minister, when he was asked how he relates to people in the community, mentioned his family and he mentioned education. And therefore, this motion, in saying that we need to go to the current Prime Minister to ensure that there is proper funding provided for our maintained nursery schools, fits in exactly with his philosophy that family and education are crucial. I commend this motion. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Scott. Councillor Richards, Councillor Scott advised me that you wish to second this motion. Do you so wish to second it?
Yes, I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Counts mentioned earlier our leading university, number one. Now, we're fortunate in Cambridge to have many fine educational institutions. Everybody knows about our higher education, more know about our excellent village colleges. Increasingly, those ones that are no longer in the bag of the county council. But excellence in education actually begins starts the learning journey with our nursery schools, which is an area where the council has to get along. We have 7 maintained nursery schools in Cambridgeshire, as well as nursery schools in primary schools and private nurseries. One of these is Thompson Nursery School in my own division of Queen Edith's in Cambridge. I live opposite, and I was lucky enough to send my own child there. But I knew about the queues long before that from the way in which people talked about locally and how they praised it and said how to give their children an excellent start. I didn't need to offset that it was outstanding, although it did, and they still are doing. Thompson works with neighbouring nursery schools as well as with primary schools, getting small children ready for school. That's an important role. It was pleasing to see the report this morning about primary schools. Many of them are in areas where we have maintained nursery schools in the county council. One of the valuable things and roles of the nursery schools mentioned in Councillor Scott's motion is that nursery schools work with some of our most disadvantaged children. The great thing about starting education when it's done is that special needs can be identified early, enabling early intervention, and we all know how important that is. Even in Cambridgeshire, we have disadvantaged pockets where there's deprivation, and nursery schools working with the families who are struggling, encouraging them and backing them up. As well as the nursery education for children, our nursery schools in Cambridgeshire are training the next generation of teachers working in faculty education here in Cambridge, not in University College London, preparing teachers, working with PGCE and MA students. And I'm told by my medical head that our nurseries are working with other nurseries, not just in Cambridge and Cambridgeshire, but all over the world as far as Shanghai. So, investing in our nurseries is a twofold investment. It's not only supporting our own children, but it's actually supporting the whole of the educational sector in
funding was left in the limbo, not knowing how much longer they could continue. In June this year, councils were called into Meet Nursery School and told that they don't have funding for the next 12 months, and no certainty at that time of security beyond July 2020. Now, government only extended nursery school funding and then only for another 12 months in November this year, just before the general election. Funny that. Our local head told me this is no way to run a school. Having such short-term funding, what about job security for teachers? How can nursery schools attract best staff if they don't know how long they're going to have that job, how long nursery schools are going to be open? What about parents who are looking for somewhere stable for their children, thinking that they might actually have to move the child after they've settled in after just a year? Most parents want nursery education for a few years, children there not just 1 year but 2 or 3 years. So I'd like to thank Councillor Scott for bringing this very important motion. I'd like to urge all of you to urge government to give nursery schools that confidence that they're defining the future and carry on providing our children with a good start to their education and supporting the education sector too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Just before I move on to the next speaker, I just wanted to say I've just been shown the error of my ways. I deliberately did not, at the start of this meeting, remind members how to use the audio and voting system, or even to explain how the rules of debate works, because I thought being into the third year of this council, we all knew by now. But could I please ask you to be very careful about how you actually use the system, since we do record these meetings for the benefit of posterity, because I believe people in future generations are desperate to hear what we had to say today. So please do be careful. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise. Chair, thank you. I apologise. I should have declared an interest on this item at the start of the meeting. I have a 3-year-old grandchild in a county council nursery, and therefore I don't intend to take part in this debate or vote.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt, has been noted. Councillor Bywater.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Scott for bringing this motion and agree with a lot of the points that have been made. I guess as Chair, I need to clarify to members that we have already drafted a letter to the Secretary of State for Education urging him to keep the Maintain Nursery School supplement for Cambridge's Maintain Nursery Schools on a permanent basis. But as you all know, we've had an election, we've had to delay that for timing purposes, and officers are finalising the final draft so that the leader can endorse it so it can be sent. Maintain Nursery Schools, alongside the remainder of the sector, play an important role in supporting the County Council to meet its statutory duties to secure sufficient good quality early years education and childcare. I want to be clear that Maintain Nursery School education, good as it is not the only example of what a good education for children looks like in Cambridgeshire, which makes this motion largely superfluous or unproven. As part of the funding settlement, the supplementary funding of £1.1 million that currently sustains Maintain Nursery Schools has only been extended for a further year, and officers have been working hard and closely with the nursery schools' leaderships to look at models to provide a sustainable support for the sector. We have agreed to postpone any changes in the nursery schools' provision until the new year, but we need to continue to plan for this in case the funding isn't continued. Many other authorities have taken the step to close their Maintain Nursery Schools, but we are working extremely hard to look at options to sustain the current level of provision in their communities. We are all aware of the budget pressures. Some members were at School Forum yesterday will be extremely aware of the budget pressures, and no funding is available to fill the gap should the Maintain Nursery School supplement finish after its current additional year. The current funding mechanism does not allow us to provide further subsidy, and we have a commitment to all providers in our early years education. Therefore, I cannot support this motion as it is giving promises that we cannot promise. Having said that, I, as chairman of the Children and Young People, will do all I can and to lobby government and our MPs for more funding for all schools in Cambridgeshire. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Jones.
What have I done? I cut myself off. How stupid. Sorry. Can I go back on? No, I can't. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm reassured to some extent by Councillor Bywater's comments, but I do think we ought to go beyond writing a letter to actually fighting as a council and pressing as hard as we can for maintained nursery schools. And the reason I say this is because although there is in the PVIs, the private, voluntary, independent sector, there are good schools. What the maintained nursery schools do is act as at the end of the pipeline. And nursery school teachers have told me lots of cases where children with complex needs, very complex needs, are not able to be supported in the PVI nurseries. And therefore, they are directed by those teachers in PVI nurseries to maintain nursery schools. Okay? So, the first thing to establish is that maintained nursery schools serve a high proportion of complex needs children. My own Brunswick Nursery School has been there for 100 years. It's now in the Brunswick and Colleges Federation. And they have children from not just all across the city, but beyond the city. People travel in with their children. A lot of people, of course, outside the city work in Cambridge. The extra resource for this SEND work is 45p per hour. And that often doesn't happen, it doesn't materialise, because it takes sometimes up to 6 months, because children are sent without the SEND statement, and to get recognition of special educational needs or disability takes a long time for the teachers to do. The other group which is paid for partly through Brock Grant, are the specialist staff, for example, for autistic children. And again, we're talking about high needs. Another group is children, they have a high percentage of children who come in not speaking any English, so English as an additional language. And also, of course, increasing amounts, as other services have fallen away, are safeguarding work and in fact, health-related work. The outstanding performance they have as sector leaders has already been mentioned, so I won't dwell on that, except to say that Brunswick and Colleges for a long time have been rated as outstanding by Ofsted, and the leadership they supply across the PVI sector is very important and recognised by the private and voluntary and independent nurseries. What I think we've got here is a case which the council needs to think of the social value of investment. Because what our maintained nursery schools are doing now is to weave together education, health and care packages for increasingly vulnerable and needy young children and providing an increased amount of family support. There are 600 or so of these children passing through nursery schools every year, and they prepare them, as others have said, for primary school. A case study I heard of recently was a child with very high complex needs, including possibly autism, came to Brunswick Nursery. They worked very hard to statement that child and to get the SEND support for them. And through the process of nurturing and support, they moved on to make a good start, and the child is now thriving at nursery school, as I'm sure you'll all be pleased to know. So I think this is not just about writing letters. This is about really fighting for an area of work that relates both to education, to care, and to health, Marmot. Early years, start in early years, so important. Thank you.
Councillor Downs.
Right.
Wait, can I just remind you that once you've pressed the silver button to indicate you wish to speak, you appear on a list which is managed here, that you do not have to then press the button again.
Thank you, Madam. I'm a slow learner. Many good points have been made, and I don't propose to label nor repeat them. As many of you know, I was head teacher of secondary school for over 20 years, and we used to look very, very carefully at the performance of our young people at 16 and beyond. And when we looked at them and we tracked back, clearly what had happened to them earlier on was critical to their success. And so I want to re-emphasize the importance of the early years, and many other speakers have already mentioned that quite clearly. But I want to make one extra point, and I just like to pick up the second sentence in paragraph 2. Research shows that. One extra piece of research, which always makes me pause and reflect upon our role, is that investment in young children is repaid in investment for society manifold. And the research I refer to, it was longitudinal research. It was in America, where a group of children were given intense support, specialised professional support, and a matched group were not. And the researchers followed those two groups from the age of 2 to the age of 27, and they logged all the things that had happened to those young people. And they found that in terms of investment, $1 invested early on saved society $7 by the time they were 27. That's because the children had this support, were able to get jobs, they were able to pay their tax, and most importantly, they kept out of the justice system. They did not go to prison. And I think that even if you didn't accept the education arguments, purely in investment terms, this is something which we must fight for very, very strongly.
Thank you, Councillor Downs. Councillor Machini, speak to us without pressing your button.
Yes, thank you very much. I will do so. I have to say, I'm thinking it's post-election fatigue and Christmas brain that so many of my colleagues seem to have forgotten how to use this. But, you know, it's all fine. I'm more exhausted than most of you. I must, like most of my colleagues that have spoken before me, pay tribute to one of the nursery schools in my division, King's Edges Nursery School, federated with the primary school on the same site on which they are. One of the most deprived area in the county, with 37% of children living below the breadline. We should not forget that. And in fact, it has been very difficult for the federated unit to set its budgets year on year because of the uncertainty on the nursery funding, which is a very big part of how they run their business. This is a school where a lot of the children that's the only opportunity they have. They're 2 years or older, and it's the only opportunity they have to actually have a hot meal. Or, you know, the head teacher has told me about how important it is for them to actually realize how you sit down at the table, eat something warm, your cutlery. It's something they don't have an opportunity to do at home. And this is heartbreaking, and it should really, really make us think very hard about being glib about this motion and how we should be reassured that something is in the background and that this is completely superfluous. I am not reassured, and I would like to ask, if possible, of the administration to show the support that they should show to the nursery schools in the county. So thank you.
Councillor Van de Ven.
I just wanted to draw attention to the Best Start in Life paper, which I know went to the Children's Committee, but also to the Health Committee, where I believe the Health Committee, which very often actually seems to work on consensus, very constructive consensus, was concerned about the practical components needed to, to deliver the aspirations in the Best Start in Life strategy. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't mean to speak for others, but this is an aspirational strategy, Best Start in Life, and surely we're talking about the fundamental building blocks needed to deliver our aspirations, and the motion just seems a no-brainer to me. It doesn't seem anything else, and I really hope that on that basis we can support it today. Thank you.
I'm a little puzzled. I do know from being on the Children and Young People's Committee and attending the school forum that the County Council is fighting hard to keep its maintained nursery schools. Councillor Bywater has said that he has written to the Secretary of State that he supports these. Therefore, I'm exceedingly puzzled as to why he then said, I can't support this motion. And I assume that means that the Conservative group can't support this motion. I find that totally bizarre. I absolutely do not understand that. And as Councillor Machini said, I would urge you to support it. I can only conclude that if you're not going to support it, it's because it's been brought by the Labour group and not by yourselves. And if that is true, that chair is truly pathetic.
Yes. Councillor Hudson.
No, Chair. Joe, come on. We've already seen, he's doing it already. He's not saying no. We're saying no to the motion because the motion isn't required. He's writing to the Prime Minister. It's going to be checked. He's covering number 3 on this. He's already said that. We're already doing it, and we're supporting Marmot. We know all about that, and we're doing it. So we'll send the letter.
Councillor Hudson.
He's doing exactly what you asked him to
Councillor
already.
Hudson, can I interrupt you? Could you please address the chair and not across the chamber? Thank you.
I'll finish.
Councillor Hoy.
Or a lot of you know, are over a century old. This has been going on for a long time now, and they do have a massively high staff costs. And because of that, that's why they are relying on this supplementary government funding. Now, Blaney and Paul in their 2017 study found that the average delivery cost for maintained nursery schools was £6.45 an hour, as opposed to £3.80 in the private and voluntary sector. Now, as you've just mentioned, a number of people have articulated the reason for that is because of the specialism, and that's the reason for those higher costs. But as Councillor Bywater said himself, there are a number of very good early years provisions elsewhere in the county and in Cambridge itself, you know, in a number of places in the private and voluntary sector too. So we do need to look at the whole sector. I think the problem that we face is we as an authority do not have the funding ourselves to make this supplementary payment. I think we're all aware of that. And also, I think that if we were to, I think at the end of the motion, it calls for pushing for county-wide maintained nurseries, which I have some sympathy with, but how on earth would we ever fund that? I mean, so out of the 7 maintained nurseries we have, 6 are in Cambridge City and 1 is in Huntingdon. So areas like Fenland and East Cambs, areas of real deprivation, for the case that has been made from the other side, those are the areas that actually need the nurseries. And now, of course, I'm not saying that anyone wants to close any nursery schools down. There's been a lot of good points made about early years and the Best Start in Life strategy, and that's correct. So we do need to be lobbying government, and I'm glad Councillor Bywater has sent that letter. The DFE, I think it's important because the DFE, like I say, the study was in 2017, so I know the point Councillor Taylor was making about the election. I don't know. None of us know why people make the decisions they make, but in 2017, they did do a big study in this, and they reviewed maintained nursery schools, so it's very much on the radar of government at the moment, because it's not just the financial challenge, there are many challenges as well, such as how it links with the review of SEND, how it works with 30 hours free childcare, because obviously that put an additional pressure on, and also the relationship just between that and the private and voluntary sector. So I do think that it isn't as simple as just saying, we need to do X thing. I think this does need to be actually a massive system-led review, and I think we need to be, as Councillor Bywater is doing, getting our names on the table and at the forefront of this. So, unfortunately, while I think this motion is very well intentioned, I can't support it.
Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. I wasn't intending to speak, but I just wanted to make 2 very quick points. I think the first point is to echo the disappointment with Councillor Bywater's contribution to this debate. This motion, as I understand it, it's not my motion, it's a motion from Councillor Scott, asks for several things to happen. It asks for a letter to be sent to the Prime Minister. It asks for this council to postpone any decisions to close or restructure provision until details of the funding situation are known. And it asks this council to make the case for the extension of maintained nursery school provision. I don't see that there should be any problem on anybody's part in those 3 statements there. And I see no reason at all why we cannot all get behind this today. And I share the disappointment that's been expressed elsewhere that Councillor Bywater has apparently rejected the all-party cross-party support that he could have gained for this, and has turned down an offer that would have seen unanimity across this chamber, as I understand it. Because my understanding from what Councillor Bywater said was that we all wanted these things, but he wasn't going to allow us to have a motion that actually said so because he was already doing it. And that's disappointing in the extreme. The second point I wanted to make was I understood, and Councillor Hoy will correct me if I misunderstood her, Councillor Hoy seemed to be suggesting that we couldn't afford to extend maintain nursery school provision in Cambridgeshire. I fully accept and agree with that, but that's not what this motion is asking. It is asking us to make the case for the extension of nursery school provision in Cambridgeshire. And I think that is an important case to make because, as Councillor Hoy has rightly said, there are areas of deprivation in Fenland and in East Cambridgeshire completely untouched by the current level of provision in Cambridgeshire. I would share what I believed to be an aspiration by Councillor Hoy, correct me if I'm wrong, to see maintain nursery school provision extended into other areas of deprivation. I fully accept that that is not in our financial gift, but that's not what this motion is asking. It is asking for the case to be made for public investment, government investment in making those provisions available, which, as my colleague Councillor Downs has already explained, pay off so handsomely years later. I would very much hope that members across this chamber would support this motion.
Councillor Richards, you reserved your right to speak on this. Do you wish to speak now? Councillor Richards, can I interrupt you? Sorry, this time you do have to, because you weren't.
Right, I'm sorry, apologise to everyone, thank you. Right, so obviously I'm speaking in favour of the motion to call upon the County Council to take the action outlined in the motion to protect the funding and maintain nursery schools, which play a key and invaluable role in early childhood education care provision. A lot of the points that I was going to make have been covered by colleagues today. There is an excellent report, Tactic, written by the Association for Professional Development in Early Years. The report points to the pivotal role of maintained nursery schools in the early education of children from families experiencing disadvantage and those with disabilities, inclusion needs and EAL, as Councillor Jones has pointed out. And as Councillor Scott has pointed out, the Early Education Chief Executive has pointed to the fact that maintained nurseries are the highest performing part of our education system. The report also points to the role played in long-term life chances and the fact that maintained nurseries are holistic, reaching out to families in the community. So I think one of my colleagues has pointed out it's a no-brainer to support this, and yet maintained nurseries are being undermined by a lack of funding. The NUE petition, that's my union, indicates that every one of the 393 nursery schools in England faces cuts as high as 30% and even closure this year. I mean, when my daughter was small and I had to work, I was indebted to a nursery where she had a full-time place with high-quality early years education, which freed me to work. Without that, I would not have been able to afford to work. And it seems to me that the key issue here is high quality. Now, Boris Johnson recently said, and I quote, his plan is to level up opportunity around the country, closing the gap. Well, here it is. Here's the opportunity. Let's see whether this opportunity is going to be taken up. Research experts are clear that early years quality educational provision levels out, closes the gap. And given the success of maintained nursery schools, why not protect them? The key thing I think here too is that the nursery schools, maintained nursery schools in Cambridge takes children from everywhere. It takes children from Cambridgeshire. But also what the motion calls upon to do, and Councillor Hoy has covered this, but I mean, you know, to some extent in saying that we can't afford it, but, you know, we need to aspire to this, we need to fight for it. Because, you know, these are the areas that you represent. Now, the Cambridgeshire Research Group in the Cambridgeshire County Council District Level Report, the English Indices of Multiple Deprivation 2019, points to very real levels of deprivation in King's Hedges, as Councillor McShane has pointed out, in Abbey, and of course there's pockets of deprivation deprivation everywhere. But also it's very clear to us, as Councillor Hoy has indicated again today, that there's deprivation against Cambridgeshire. A lot of these maintained nursery schools are in urban areas, but why not? Why not actually take this quality provision, the opportunity, and this is to quote the leader of the Conservative Party, why not take the opportunity to level up opportunity around the country? Now, MPs, including 12 Conservatives, signed a letter to ministers in September 2018, urging them to take urgent action to secure additional funding for nursery schools. So I'm going to reach out to Conservative colleagues today and say, you know, vote for this motion, join those 12 MPs, because this is key in levelling up opportunities in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Councillor Scott, do you wish to reply to the debate? Could I ask you to press your button? Oh, you've already come up on here.
Thank you. I have to say I was somewhat surprised that Councillor Bywater, as I heard it, said that the motion was not based in research. All I can do is assure you, Councillor Bywater, that I would not have said in the motion that it was based in research. I've actually used the word research in paragraph 2, and there are various assertions, so there is research, and research has been referred to by others who are here. I can assure you that solid, rigorous, comprehensive and contextual research is the base of this motion. And the paper to which I referred, Occasional Paper 13, itself cites no fewer than 14 resources published variously in Research Methods in Education, in a briefing on funding for maintained nursery schools, Educational Researcher, Action Research in Training and Teaching and Learning, Interpretive Qualitative Data, European Early Childhood Education Research Journal. And this research dates from 1996 right through 2001 through to 2009, and right with various articles or research pieces appearing in between up to 2019 and including 2019. So therefore the research is solid, the research is there. Councillor Hoy referred to the private and voluntary sector. There is a difference. And the private and voluntary sector is inspected by Ofsted, but my information is that the inspections by Ofsted of the maintained nursery schools is set at a higher level. And the maintained nursery schools, as Councillor Taylor referred to, have scored hugely, highly here in Cambridge. Now, as for the letter, I'm interested to see that the letter was actually going to the Secretary of State. Well, in my understanding of the parliamentary system and democracy in this country, Union, is that the Secretary of State is not the Prime Minister. It is the Prime Minister whom we believe the letter should go, and the Prime Minister himself has a direct interest in early years childhood, education and training, etc. He has also said that his government will renounce austerity, and therefore it is an opportune time for us to send this letter to the Prime Minister in the terms that it is written. I also emphasise that it's making the case, as has been noted by others, for the extension of maintained nursery school provision in Cambridgeshire. Do the Conservative group wish to go down in history as voting against a motion that is asking for the attention to be paid by the Prime Minister to extending these maintained nursery schools out there into your very divisions? How can you actually sit there and deny the children in your divisions access to maintained nursery schools, which are absolutely vital? And as I said, we recognise absolutely the deprivation and the inequality that exists out there in Cambridgeshire, and we will fight for the children out there in Cambridgeshire, and you seem to be uncommitted to fighting for the children in your own divisions. And I conclude simply by saying this, that I agree with what has been said, that actually, first of all, a letter to the Secretary of State is insufficient. And if there is a letter, why can't it contain exactly what's in this motion? There's absolutely no reason why. Okay, the letter was drafted. Well, please, could you consider going back and redrafting it to include the points that are made in this motion? That's number one. Number two, perhaps the time has come, and it's an opportune time, to actually set up a delegation to the Prime Minister and go down there to number 10 and make the case for Cambridge and Cambridgeshire, and make the case for the children of Cambridge and Cambridgeshire, the children of your own divisions, so that they can have access to this quality, maintained nursery school education and, as well. And I end simply on this note, which goes to the question of research. What this occasional paper 13 makes a recommendation. It's crucial that the acute funding crisis with the maintained nursery sector is addressed as an urgent priority before any more of the maintained nursery school sector closes due to lack of funding. And we're very well aware that there are already proposals that have been put to the heads of the nursery schools for 4 ways that they can go in terms of actually ending maintained nursery schools as they currently exist. It's orange with respect. And it's now gone red because you chose to interrupt me. No, Councillor Maguire, I will ask you in your role of chair to exercise that role absolutely fairly. And you have sought to interrupt me when I was coming to my conclusion,
Scott,
which
I waited
is
until
wrong.
the timer was within 5 seconds and I asked you to wind up. I didn't ask you to stop speaking.
You interrupted,
I
with
was
respect,
giving you notice.
you
Councillor
interrupted
Scott.
me, Councillor Maguire, and that is absolutely unacceptable. I was winding up and I would have been finished
Would you
in
please
5
sit down?
seconds.
Thank you. I now intend to move to the electronic vote. Mrs Rowe, would you please talk us through the process, please, so that members are aware of what they are supposed to do?
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the motion, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the motion, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross. Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. The result of the vote is 21 votes in favour, 25 against and no abstentions. The motion is therefore lost.
Thank you. We now move to the second motion submitted by Councillor Count. Can I ask Councillor Count to move and speak to his motion as set out on pages 5 to 7 of the Council agenda? Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be surprised, excuse me. I'd be surprised if anyone disagrees with the core sentiment of this motion. I mean, basically what we're saying is we want to improve the air quality and have a good quality of air for all of us. Ourselves, our friends, our children, everyone we know. And to have that on a daily, breathe that in on a daily basis. I'd also be surprised if anyone disagrees that there is a substantial evidence base as why this is a good cause to unite behind and not disagree about. Other key elements of the proposal that I think are very easy to understand, very approachable and easily adopted, things that we can work together are those examples like increasing the green canopy. You know, we've said, let's increase the hedges, let's increase the trees, but let's look at other options like city trees. But it's not sufficient just to say this out loud. A lot of people have said this. Let's do a piece of work. Let's look at all those areas where we could actually make a difference that weren't considered before. For example, green walls, as put in the air policy document, or perhaps sedum roofs on bus shelters. There are lots of areas where if you put your mind to it, we could actually increase the green canopy. Who amongst you would disagree with the other purpose of this motion? To increase the conversion rate from people driving fossil fuel cars to electric vehicles. It's a very simple principle, and I think we're all united on that. And there are some very good suggestions in here how to move from fossil fuels to clean energy vehicles. We know that the city plans to have newly registered taxi vehicles ultra low from next year. However, the policy of allowing vehicles up to 8-year-olds to be registered and using the taxi means that polluting vehicles could still be there even as far as 2030 without moving them from the city core. So we've put in an idea to actually try and accelerate that change. What about having a 2-tier licence system and letting the public throw their vote when they get to a taxi rank? You have a premium taxi in green, labelled up, this is an environmentally friendly vehicle, and you may have to pay a small premium for that. Or you can go in the polluting vehicle and pay less. But actually what we're doing is further accelerating that change by saying those taxis, if they're not green by 2022, why would we allow them the privilege of going into a bus lane? Why don't we signal that in 2022 your choice is pay a little bit more and be green, but also get there faster than being in the polluting vehicle that costs you less? That seems like a fairly reasonable suggestion. And we're applying the same principle to the bus companies. The bus companies have put some money into some low engine vehicles, but we do have polluting vehicles that are able to enter the city. Why would we allow them the privilege of using our bus lanes past a certain date? Why would we not set a date for them to work for us? We know from our experience everywhere that buying buses and integrating them into a network, it's important to get them into the city centres where the pollutants are too high at the earliest possible period. So why not say to them, we want to work with you, but also we're sending a very clear message that if you don't accelerate your plans to become very green, then you will not be able to use the bus lanes. I assure you there are plenty of different bus companies out there who would love the access to Cambridgeshire's bus lanes. Free parking for electric vehicles. There's such a small proportion at the moment that the impact on somebody's budget of offering that would be marginal, but it's another key incentive that's not being trialled at the moment. So if the sole reason to say no is finance, let's have a discussion about that finance between all the partners, the GPC, the CPCA, the county, the districts and the city. It's up there for discussion. And looking at this motion is primarily one positive proposal after another about incentivising change. I'm sure it's well received by the public because it talks about what we can do different alongside the public to help them to change and make choices that's better for us and air quality for the future. It includes backing for the Cam Metro, which I believe is the only real solution to congested areas like the Cambridge City as a true alternative to what we've got at the moment. So I hope you can all support this, and I look forward to working with you, our partners, and intrinsically alongside an incentivised public, not alienated public, to achieve much needed change. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kent, you have a second for your motion. Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Councillor Harrison, I have your...
Actually, I beg your pardon, I didn't mean to indicate. So.
Yeah, just could you... Sorry, Councillor Dupre, I was speaking. Councillor Harrison, you'd press your button. Could I ask you to hold... Yes.
Sorry.
Take it off. Thank you. We now move to the debate. However, we have been given notice of an amendment by Councillor Dupre. Councillor Dupre, would you like to move your amendment and confirm your second, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I rise to move this amendment. My seconder is Councillor Linda Jones.
Councillor Jones, could you just confirm and tell me whether you intend to reserve your right? Reserving your right to speak, sorry. Yeah, but you were talking across me, so I apologise. I was caught. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The motion before us today has caused considerable concern, not only on opposition benches, but also among the local business community and the Council's local authority partners. We have all, I think, seen the correspondence from business and university representatives to the Greater Cambridge Partnership and from the CEO of Cambridge Ahead, a business and academic member organisation dedicated to the successful growth of Cambridge and its region. They all urge you to reconsider your course of action, which risks enormous damage to the collaborative process that has been taking place for some time to address the problems of air pollution, carbon emissions, congestion, and the inadequacy of existing public transport solutions. Chairman, although this amendment has been put on the agenda in my name, in fact, when it was submitted, it had two names on it, which were myself and Councillor Jones, and I wanted to reiterate from the outset that this has been a collaborative process and is, for all intents and purposes, although our procedures don't appear to allow it, a joint amendment. The amendment that we have put reasserts the need for several things. Firstly, evidence-based policy making. Secondly, partnership working. Thirdly, proper consideration of a full range of possible measures. And fourthly, improvements to public transport, which must take place quickly and be funded. The Greater Cambridge Partnership has been proceeding on an all-party basis, gathering evidence from experts and inputs from the public. Its recent Citizens' Assembly called for bold and urgent action. The Greater Cambridge Partnership is working on an integrated strategy addressing the interrelated challenges of congestion, improvements to public transport and carbon emissions, as well as air quality. Its initial conclusions are expected early in the new year. It's most welcome that the Council, as expressed in this motion, is keen to focus on how to reduce toxic traffic fumes, but this is an extraordinary and contradictory way of going about it. It's odd to present an initiative like this about air pollution, at the same time as dismissing out of hand measures which are important policy options to combat it. The proposal today to rule out certain courses of action comes without evidence and sits poorly against the careful evidence-based work being carried out cross-party by the Greater Cambridge Partnership, which has not yet reached a conclusion. It's also a mistake to try to tackle air pollution coming from traffic on its own, while we know that we must also tackle congestion, improve public transport and reduce carbon emissions. These obviously need dealing with together, or we will end up with contradictory policies. Without the measures that the party opposite want to reject, it's difficult to see that there will be the means to substantially improve public transport in the short to medium term, enabling it to become a cleaner and more efficient alternative to the private car and to relieve our congested and polluted roads. Even if they don't like some of the potential solutions, it seems ridiculous not to wait for the evidence, see the conclusions and base their response on them. They should engage constructively in the partnership they have joined for this purpose and stop seeking to position themselves as lobbyists from the outside. The outcome of the GCP's process is keenly awaited by many, and this looks like an unfortunate attempt to preempt it. The amendment that we have put and worked very hard on seeks to restore to this Council's approach to all of this that respect for evidence, that respect for partners and the need to work together with them. It seeks to restore having all of those options firmly on the table and working through them together to address those multiple issues, not just air pollution, but all of the other things that I've already outlined. And it seeks to provide and maintain on the table an option to fund public transport in the short term. We cannot wait till Camden Metro in 2030, even if it is funded, to address a problem that will be with us then for another 10 years. We have to start acting much, much sooner than that. The amendment that we have puts everything back on the table, respects the process that has begun up till now and has been ongoing and that has not yet reached a conclusion. I would very much urge members to accept and vote for the amendment so that we don't cut across the work of our partners, business and our communities. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've heard a theme really in a way of evidence, using evidence, of collaboration, of partnership, and of trying to get things right for the long term. We've heard it a lot today, and nominally, notionally, this motion is another part of that, because it's about tackling one very important aspect of environmental policy, which is about the air quality. But of course, the motion contains a bomb. There's absolutely no. It's a bomb actually hidden in plain sight. It's not, nobody's trying to call it a secret, but the bomb is to blow up the evidence-based, collaborative, partnership, thoughtful, careful work that has been done now for 3 or 4 years through the Greater Cambridge Partnership and in alliance with the Combined Authority and all the member councils and, of course, with all its stakeholders and the public, to build a comprehensive, coherent, long-term, sustainable transport strategy. This motion's rejection of a potential key part, that's to say the use of pricing as an incentive to change behaviour, a common method used by governments all over the world for all sorts of things, including by this council, to adjust, to encourage people to think differently about the way that they behave. And this suite of policies which contains the potential for using pricing as a mechanism of behaviour change in transport is an incredibly important plank and needs full evaluation by the authorities and by the public and partners. That's what the GCP has been trying to do for several years. And it is really distressing to me. I've been working on these issues for well over 15 years. I find it heartbreaking to see that in this motion, which contains a lot of good stuff, which is about the future of all of our parts of our county as a whole, all parts of our county. That's why I got grumpy before, because it's so important. I have always felt that all parts of this county matter, that all communities and their history and their culture and their traditions and their needs and their special circumstances, that they all matter to me. And I don't want people who just turn their heads away when it comes to something which affects Greater Cambridge and indeed the wider county beyond. It's so important that we listen to each other. There are numerous. I have a list of areas of pure evidence related to people who want us to do better on this. The public who have been consulted twice and who have, through public consultations in recent years, as well as the Citizens' Assembly, all of those have indicated that the public understands the complexity and difficulty of the problems that we face and want evidence and collaboration and calmness and quietness and to solve these problems and not just unilateral actions by one council or one partner. All our partners, all the partners within the Greater Cambridge Partnership, all the stakeholders, these stakeholders who've written letters, I mean, we're talking about absolute movers and shakers here, absolute international movers and shakers who do not want this motion to be passed because of the critical damage that it could do to the collaborative, evidence-based work that we're trying to do on transport. The Spear report, the economic report, was absolutely clear that the economy of Greater Cambridge is in grave danger unless we pull together to find long-term solutions, and they must be brave solutions. The Cuspy project on transport hasn't even been reported to General Purposes Committee, as I understand it yet, has made it quite clear that it is behaviour change that will bring about the early wins that we must have to tackle climate change. It is behaviour change. It is the inducements to change behaviour. Nudges in one direction, nudges in the other. We need to have that full suite of options at our fingertips to develop this suite of solutions that we can do through the GCP. And so to these letters that have been received, which are absolutely unprecedented in my experience, it is absolutely extraordinary to see letters written yesterday by large numbers, great groupings of the largest, most important, most influential at the local, the regional, the national and the international level, to see them basically begging this council not to do this. Now, please bring another motion on air quality and we will debate it and we will look at it with an open heart.
Harrison,
Absolutely,
you have a red
of course
light.
we will. But please do not pass this motion today. Please amend it as required.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'm pleased to see that Councillor Harrison is now taking notice of what the people say, and she's referring to the democratic principles of this country by listening to what people say. And so, of course, it's very important to listen to the people. And, of course, the group over there found that out just recently. What do we think of what's been said? Of course, everybody recognises the need for clean air. We should be looking at ways of making things cleaner and better and safer. But actually, on this side, we believe in the carrot, not the stick. And I don't believe that people want to be fined into a behaviour. I think they want to be rewarded for a behaviour. So if we're going to get people to change their habits, we've got to offer better alternatives, not just fine them. So the future lies in the metro system and things like that, not just putting fines on. I have to regard that we all represent our own divisions, and I have to think of the people who cannot afford to live in Cambridge and live in places like Chatteris and Wilburton and Streatham and come to work in Cambridge to keep Cambridge active and keep the businesses in Cambridge working. You know, the people who work in the shops, the hospitals, the schools, they don't earn huge salaries like some of the people in Cambridge. They have to travel in, and at the moment, you know, they have got to come in by car. So penalise them, and maybe the businesses you want to succeed in Cambridge will suffer because their workers won't arrive here. So we have to consider all this sort of thing. And I don't believe in congestion charges at this point. I would also say we should focus on permanent fixes, not short-term fixes, but permanent, acceptable solutions, not draconian charging methods. And I go back from my experience in San Francisco, where they introduced a public transport system. It's so good, safe, clean, reliable that people use it as an option, and the car is not being used so much. That's the way to do it, not by congestion charges and fining. And I would just like to pay a compliment to Councillor Dupre. She, as I know, gives full and comprehensive reports to the parishes when she goes and does her visits. And I just hope and believe that when she goes to Sutton, Whitford, Meeple and Wentworth, she will make it very clear to those people that she is fighting to charge them to go to work. And I just hope that she gives her parish council a full and comprehensive description of that. In the meantime, I won't be voting for this amendment.
Councillor Braddon.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, in this matter, I speak as in a number of capacities. I'm local member for Milton and Waterbeach, and a lot of my casework relates to bus timetables and such like from my residents. I also sat on with Councillor Scott on the local liaison forum for Milton Road, and I'm mindful that the GCP supported that work in order to, and I quote broadly, I may not be exactly right, but it was to prioritise bus transport into and out of Cambridge. I'll come back to that in a minute. I've also been representing South Cambs District Council on the Mayoral Bus Reform Task Force, and I am chairman of the Cambridge Area Bus Users Group.
Now, in all those capacities, I would support this amendment because I cannot possibly accept the use of bus lanes for electric vehicles, motorcycles and scooters, and nor providing free parking for electric vehicles because, one, the whole drive of the local liaison forums was to make bus transport convenient, quick, reliable, into and out of Cambridge, where, as you said, a lot of people work and want to come in. You will probably be aware that the guided busway, which has been a remarkable success, unfortunately gets full by the time it arrives at Longstanton. So we need, the reason buses are so important is because they go into each one of our villages. They provide resources, they provide transport for our villagers to come into Cambridge. And what we need to do is to provide a combination of fast, quick journeys into Cambridge and out to our villages, but also the stopping journeys. Now, we can't do that if these bus lanes that the GCP is about to install in May 2020 on Histon Road to begin with, we can't do those if those lanes are congested with electric vehicles. You know, simply changing the number of vehicles on the road from petrol-driven to electric-driven is not going to save the congestion problem. We must maximise our bus transport into Cambridge in order to give that flexibility of public transport, which is so valued by people within Cambridge and our villages outside in the countryside. So I cannot support this motion for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, can I correct that?
I think we...
I would like to say this is
what
why I
you meant.
support the amendment.
Councillor Kavanagh. You've got to come in last one again.
Yeah, I fully support this amendment. It's a necessary amendment. The original motion, yes, it's commendable. You know, we don't want the silent poison in our city and our market towns. We know in Cambridge, it's statistically proven, something like over 40 people a year die because of the pollution, the silent killer. And that's why I think the original motion, yes, tackling pollution, yes, very important. But what I find very disappointing is that that commendable aspiration is undermined by, how should I say, the kind of interference in the work that's been done by the Greater Cambridge Partnership, not only for improving public transport within this Cambridge, but also in the surrounding Greater Cambridge area. But that's also linked to improving the wealth of our area and so on. So the Greater Cambridge Partnership is proving itself to be hugely important for getting our public transport right. It's a major scandal that Cambridge, you know, in the region that's regarded as the wealthiest, fastest growing part of the UK, has such an abysmal public transport system. And as has already been mentioned by other speakers, the public want to get on public transport. They don't want to be sitting in private cars, congesting the city every day as they make their way to work. And the element of charging, now it's been mentioned in the statement from Councillor Count that it would be a penalty on the lower paid and so on. But I'll just bring to your attention that we've been trying to introduce and implement residence parking schemes across Cambridge. And from the response from the public who have had the schemes, the parking zones implemented, is that they are very pleased with having them there because it has cut the number of commuters coming into the city, cut the pollution. And I've had statements in my local area where we managed to get Coleridge, where we managed to get a residence parking scheme through on a majority vote, and people who are even objecting to the original notion of a residence parking scheme come up to me and say, it's wonderful, why didn't we do this years ago? Now that's one measure that's been brought in to tackle the number of vehicles coming into our city. And you all are aware that it involves paying for permits. And my constituency has a mixed demographic. There are people there who are not hugely wealthy and so on. They have limited salaries and so on, but they are happy to pay for their permits to park their cars. And I'll just give another piece of information from my local area. In the summer, we had Mill Road closed for about 8 weeks while the bridge over Mill Road had to have work done on an arch for the improvement of the general national rail network. But during that 8 weeks closure, I mean, the County Council and Greater Cambridge Partnership took the opportunity, I think, to monitor pollution levels and also to monitor the change in traffic flows. And we're waiting for the results of that. But anecdotally, obviously, pollution levels dropped. But also anecdotally, residents throughout that 8 weeks, even those inconvenienced for various reasons, not being able to travel about in their cars as much as they would like, residents keep coming up saying, why can't we have more of this? Why can't we have roads without congested traffic? The demand is there, and the results of the recent People's Assembly has shown that. In the internal poll of the people who took part in the People's Assembly, top of the list was people were happy to have roads that were closed.
Councillor Kavanagh, you have a red light. Sorry, I didn't give you notice.
Well, finally, I'll just say there is an acceptance that charging for vehicles entering the city needs to be put to the people, not to a decision being made here unilaterally and preempting democratic decisions.
Councillor,
Thank you.
Councillor Jones, do you wish to exercise your right to speak?
I do press it. Yes, I do press it.
Please press
right,
your button.
got it right this time. Okay, so let's get back to the amendment, okay? Why did we make this joint amendment? Well, first of all, because we both on the climate change group, and we've been working for the last 3 or 4 months, actually, together, cross-party, across the council, and suddenly up pops this motion, which is about narrow sectional interests, rather than what I thought we'd all been doing, which is working together. Because after all, you know, Conservatives aren't going to survive climate change because of this motion, and we all go down. We're all going down together if we go, as it were. So this joint amendment is to emphasise 3 things, okay? One is the importance of evidence, one is the importance of partnership, and one is the importance of a broad-based strategy. Partnership is crucial. In the first version of Councillor Count's motion, partners were not mentioned at all, okay? They then crept in when it got tweaked. But partnership and teamwork are essential at all local government and organisational levels if we're going to improve air quality, safeguard our health and get to carbon zero by 2050. We know relatively little can be achieved by the County Council working alone. The main mention of partnership in the motion, which we were angry about, was that partnership is about demanding that other people do things. Okay? The second issue is about evidence-based policy making. Evidence-based policy making in the motion is sidelined. We were angry about that. It's almost evidence-free, it's full of assertions and attacks. The work of GPC, as others have said in their research, is ignored. Seems to be totally unaware of everything that the city and districts are doing in terms of environmental improvements. It seems to be unaware of the messages that have come through, as others have said, from Citizens' Assembly and the travel survey work. And of course also now letters very recently from Cambridge Ahead, from the Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce, from Cambridge Network, from the Greater Cambridge Partnership, all of which are saying, hang on a minute, withdraw this motion, just think again. So that angered us too. And the third area is that it doesn't think about the links between air pollution and congestion, active travel and human health, which our own climate change strategy is trying to do. We don't want electric vehicles clogging up the bus lanes. We don't want electric vehicles parking free in car parks. We don't want people in unfriendly, congested urban areas. We want people to walk and cycle if it's pleasant and easy for them to do so. This amendment is about creating a virtuous cycle of cleaner, less congested areas, more active travel, and better human health. And by the way, urban areas are not the only places where there is congestion. One of the areas where there's key congestion and key levels of pollution is around the A14 in Huntingdon and around Huntingdon. So we've got lots of issues here that we have to deal with.
Councillor Count, you have the right to reply to the debate on the amendment. Do you wish to exercise that right?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Seems to be some confusion. So let me clarify one thing to start off with. This is a motion on air quality. It says it at the top, it's a motion on air quality. That's what this is all about. They're about incentives to improve air quality, what options we should be considering and what options we shouldn't be considering. Unfortunately, it seems that everything that the other parties talk about is congestion charging and their belief that that is a solution to deal with air quality and congestion. We do, I think everybody's mentioned congestion, including yourself, all the way through this. This is not the core of this subject. This subject is on air quality. We've offered up many solutions to drive forward, sorry, wrong choice of words, to move forwards in the direction of improving air quality. And one by one they get rejected. So, for example, don't use bus lanes for electric vehicles because we need those for buses. I agree in segregated bus lanes for buses, I do. But at this present point in time, the amount of electric vehicles on the road are so minuscule, they will not hold up the buses. We've put in the motion the fact that it may be reviewed as and when they do start affecting the buses. Don't have free electric car parking spaces because we don't want cars in the city. Actually, if you can't get all the cars out of the city, which seems to be the ultimate desire, at least have the better ones in temporarily. One by one, these things have been discarded. The amendment to the city trees, you know, to carry on with existing work. Well, let me tell you about existing work. I'm going to talk about Cambridge City here. They drew up their map in 2004, 15 years ago. By 2009, they developed a plan for how to deal with it after 5 years. They drew that up with South Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire District Council. It contained policies that were ambitious but deliverable to get them out of a zone by 2015. 2019, no updates. 10 years. 10 years. No admission of failure, no updates. So forgive me, forgive the Conservative county councillors for trying to think that we need to try and influence this because not enough has happened. 10 years is not an acceptable period of time to write a strategy, see it fail, and not have the latest one up on the government website or advance. Lots of things get talked about in planning, but very little has moved forward. We talked about evidence base. What did you make of the evidence base that the public health said that this congestion zone on air quality leads to social inequality? Where's that in the evidence base when you're fighting to have your charging zones? Where is the GCP evidence base that says a policy on air quality charging is a temporary measure as the vehicles become cleaner? But those aren't mentioned today, so it's a very one-sided use of evidence that leads to a particular outcome. And as I reiterate, this is about air quality, it's not about urgent. The SIPIA report was misquoted earlier on. There's nothing in the SIPIA report promoting congestion charging or air quality charging. It's not in there. In fact, it talks about the current use of resource for travel. So there's quite a bit more that has drifted into the main debate. But in this amendment, the main purpose of this amendment seems to be Labour and Liberal councillors' desire to put air quality charging and congestion charging back on the table. Yeah. This is about air quality. We don't wish to charge for it. It leads to social inequality, and it's a very temporary measure that doesn't deliver a long-term result because we know the changes that have happened. So therefore, for that reason, I cannot support this amendment.
Colleagues, we now move to the vote on the amendment. Mrs. Rowe, would you please talk us through this, please?
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the amendment, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the amendment, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross. Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. The result of the vote is 21 votes in favour, 27 against and no abstentions. The amendment is therefore lost.
Thank you, Mrs. Rowe. Councillor Harrison, you're rising on a point of order. Could you wait for the microphone, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. This is an unusual thing to do because we've discussed a motion and it has been passed. We've discussed an amendment and it has been lost, beg pardon. But I want to propose a second amendment, please, under Part 4.1, Para 11D of the Constitution, and that is to refer this motion to the General Purposes Committee for further consideration and consultation with GCP board members, stakeholders and the public. That's my proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Do you have a seconder for that notice of motion? Seconded by Councillor Dupre. Colleagues, just to explain the procedure, that a motion without notice is permissible under these circumstances, and you've heard Councillor Harrison's proposal. What I intend to do is to allow, as in normal practice, 5 minutes for the proposer to speak, and subsequently at the end, the seconder will also have 5 minutes. However, I suggest we then go straight to the debate and that we do not repeat what we've just heard during this debate. Councillor Harrison.
I do this because of the seriousness of the situation and because I think that there is a huge misunderstanding that may be arising on the Conservative benches about what this motion really is effectively achieving. And I think that it is disingenuous, frankly, of the Leader of the Council to suggest that this is a motherhood and apple pie motion about air quality that everybody should be able to accept when it contains, as I said earlier, a bomb. It is a bomb that has been spotted by an enormous array of extremely important organisations within our community. And if Councillor Count wishes to insult those of us on this side of the chamber for not having, or for misinterpreting in some way what he's trying to do, in insulting us, he insults them also. They have spotted what is going on here, and they are pleading with the council to step back from this moment, from making this decision. The point is that this is not the right forum for making decisions over matters that are incredibly complicated, that require policies which balance each other out, that do not counteract each other, and which provide a long-term and stable and secure base for going forward for the huge benefit of all our people. And I would just say on one issue of detail, the poorest people have the lowest access to cars. They don't have cars, or if they do, they basically would rather be spending their money on something else. The issue is about improving public transport so that we've got more choice, better choices for transport. And that's what we've got to work towards, and we should be working towards that together. I want to use the rest of my time just to read out part of Cambridge Ahead's letter. This is Cambridge Ahead, who represent all the big organisations around here. And we cannot ignore them and we must not insult them. The Chief Executive says, we hope and expect, therefore, that all relevant local authorities will take into account the outputs of these robust and transparent processes. And she's referring to the painstaking work that has been done in the GCP, with this council a full partner of it, and with all the public consultation that's gone on. Of greatest significance, she says, is consideration of some form of charging mechanism as a means of both reducing demand and providing funding streams that can enable the step change in enhanced public transport alternatives that are needed to address the climate emergency. Both the Better Choices for Journeys survey and the Citizens' Assembly demonstrate that there is support for the introduction of some form of charge in recognition of what this could achieve as an overall package of measures. The Better Choices survey went to 5,144 people right across this county. Right across this county. It was selected to go right across this county. She says we would further draw your attention to the fact that both the survey and the Citizens' Assembly, the support demonstrated for a form of road charging that was dependent on there being an improved offer that provides a viable alternative to the private car, and that's the key thing. Additionally, it was made clear that any funding raised by a charge should be hypothecated for that purpose. Your motion seemingly disregards these findings, she says, from the survey and the Citizens' Assembly. At a premature stage, before full consideration of all plausible city access options have been discussed and examined logically through the GCP processes, your motion indicates that improving the alternatives to the motor car is a priority, but it does not comment on how this would be funded. It is our view, she says, that the step change in public transport provision needed to deliver that alternative access across the travel to work area will come at significant ongoing cost. The introduction of a form of road charging could be expected to offer a clear and direct funding source at the required scale, and we remain keen to see the modelling of potential revenues through the City Access Programme. We cannot currently identify any alternative source of revenue funding that would enable this to happen. So you see, Mr. Chairman, this is a complex matter of vast importance, and there are really significant players and movers and shakers in our society who are pleading with the Conservative group not to proceed at this time with the content of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Before I move on to the other speakers, as I say, it was obviously a forlorn hope on my part that we could, since this motion is about moving this proposal to GPC for further discussion. I've got speakers, but I hope, as I say, you will not repeat what has gone through. It's simply as to whether or not this matter should be referred back to GPC for discussion. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been listening to this very important debate from a very neutral point of view. And while I support quite a lot of the amendment, I also support the leader's original proposals. However, I would certainly support that it goes further and goes to a working party, call it what you like, because it does not contain enough details, and some of the details which are put in here are very ambiguous. For example, I'm going to mention the lovely word St Neots, although I represent Eton Sokol and Eton Ford, but St Neots High Street in 2007 was recognised as one of the most highly polluted high streets in the country. And we've just looked at the evidence on here. And yes, it's probably not quite as polluted as it used to be because there's not quite so many cars go there now. And that I blame HDC's parking policy, but that's another point. But just going on to the original motion, there's a lot of mention made of electric vehicles. There are also clean vehicles, but are not electric. For example, LPG vehicles, hydrogen powered vehicles, which incidentally is mentioned on page 40 of the
Councillor Giles, can I interrupt you? I did try to. We're now speaking to effectively the amendment being proposed by Councillor Harrison that we refer this matter back to GPC. So could I ask you not to repeat part of the debate on so that what we are debating on, should this be moved back to GPC or not?
Exactly
so please don't go into stuff which is part of the main debate. Thank you.
why it should go further and get more details put into it. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Before I move on to Councillor Tierney, I just want to remind people that it is getting quite late, but I'm allowing this to continue but I actually need to remind you that some members do have other meetings this afternoon. It's unfortunate we had to reschedule this meeting, and I believe some members are also feeling some discomfort. So please try to stick to the point. Thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this, so I apologise for taking up a little bit of time, but I had to respond, I felt, to something that Councillor Harrison said. And it was her comment that, that poor people don't own cars, or those few that do probably would rather spend their money on something else. Now, I am represented to, I'm elected and represent one of the most deprived parts of the county. They don't like being referred to as that, actually, and I don't blame them at all, because nobody there feels that they are massively deprived, but that's what the stats say. And I can assure you, I can absolutely assure you, there are plenty of people on lower incomes who do own cars and very, very much love owning their cars and certainly would not rather spend their money on something else. In fact, the car gives them a feeling of empowerment, it gives them freedom, it lets them go about their business, it gives them better access to job opportunities, it lets them look after their family better. They think it's great that they own their cars. And so I simply couldn't sit back and accept that statement. When I first came onto council, many years ago now, this debate was going on then. And Councillor Harrison was ideologically consistent back then. Absolutely, I accept that. I think that's a great trait to have. I was also ideologically consistent, and this is what I feel about congestion charging. I think that it penalises the poorest. Because if you've got a lot of money, you can afford to pay it, and it means nothing to you. But if you've saved up to own a car, and you've got that freedom, and you've got that empowerment, it takes it right away from you. And I think that's very cruel.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Our group does support the idea of this going to General Purposes Committee for further consideration. I wanted to read, in support of that, a letter from the grown-ups in the room, who are Claire Ruskin, the Director of Cambridge Network, which represents his business right across Cambridge, especially and the GCP, and the university representative on GCP, and they wrote to Councillor Count saying, "We believe you are pushing a party political line in your blog and in your air quality paper. We'd be grateful if you could set the record straight when you bring this to Council on Thursday this week. Broadcasting this sort of story has no useful place in the work we're trying to do as a collaborative group across party political boundaries to help the region operate more sustainably. We need to gather and analyse data on which to base decisions. We haven't made decisions, and we have not seen pushing forward, as you call it, or steadfastly opposing by another side. As far as we have seen it, we've been through a number of years now, well aligned. So accusations about that, we feel, are trying to make a party political point. Organisations large and small, including retailers, hospitality industry, the healthcare industry, education, engineering, science, business, need commuting in and out of Cambridge to take less time and be more reliable. We are going ahead cautiously already, and having a public fight won't really help people, except Councillor Count has decided to do that. So please let us work together to keep the region economically viable rather than have businesses leave the country." So there are the grown-ups in the room. That is a very, very good reason to take it to GCP for further work. GPC.
Councillor Dupre, do you wish to exercise your right as seconder to speak to this proposal? Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Councillor Count, you have the right to reply to the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very much going to stick to the issue of whether this should be resolved, this motion should be resolved at full council today, or whether it should go to General Purposes Committee, or perhaps maybe somewhere else. So nobody's, that letter just said, which that letter you've got, and the other letter that Jane Peterson Todd wrote, came to me lobbying me for a certain viewpoint, to go with their certain viewpoint on that. And they said, make it clear to full council. And I've replied to them both, and I said, I won't make it clear to full council. What I will do is I'll circulate your letters to members so that they have the full information, so they can guide themselves and put the weight of importance that they choose to attribute to those those contributions. I think we have a good working relationship with businesses and the universities and the GCP and the Combined Authority at times, but we don't always see eye to eye on things, you know. And when the evidence comes in front of you, people somehow think that you put evidence in front of somebody and 2 + 2 = 4. These are, we've heard earlier, much more complex issues. And so it depends which evidence you select and which ones you add weight to, that you draw your own conclusions. And we've seen from their letters that they've drawn certain conclusions. But I go back to what I said earlier. Those conclusions and those letters are very much talking about congestion and congestion charging. Today's policy is about air quality and how we move forward with that. Now, I know that Councillor Harrison believes that she spotted some kind of time bomb ticking here, but I must point out that in my motion, I have included the words, these types of additional taxation are not a solution, are not a necessary step at this point in time. At this point in time. So there is no ticking time bomb that stops everything forever. It says that, you know, we know so many things that are going on out there that make this unworkable for air quality that at this point in time it doesn't work. So there isn't a ticking time bomb there. The one thing I do want to talk about is the pushing forward. Nobody's seen, in that letter, they haven't seen any pushing forward by the other parties for congestion charging or air quality charging. Well, what on earth is this if it's not pushing it forward? You have an entire Conservative group saying no, and all the amendments, and the secondary amendment, is to keep this live and kicking. Everybody on that side is pushing forward in one direction, and we're saying no to that in the other. So I do not see that. The last thing I'd want to talk about is election results. Election results, we've heard already today, let's push this back to the GPC, or was it the GCP? No, let's get the GCP full involved. That was what we heard. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about the national election results, I'm going to talk about the county council election results. I stood in the front of the public and I said what I'm going to do in the county council and use my brain to be a county councillor. And one of the responsibilities of a county councillor, nobody else, is decision on charging policies. That is not a district council position, that is not a city council position, and it's certainly not a Greater Cambridge Partnership position. But somehow along the lines, the good people of Cambridge and its immediate environments seem to think that we, as county councillors, should abrogate our duties and let GCP make decisions on what is our right and be influenced, not just heavily influenced, but actually have our decisions made for us by other influential bodies. The reason we stood for election was to listen to the evidence, look at it, motions such as today, and take a view and therefore cast a vote. And we've heard how important this is today. Why on earth would you take something this important away from a full council and put it down to committee level? It's there in front of you. We supplied extra evidence in the linked document that supported all of this, all right? But nobody wants to see that or read that or refer to that. Instead, it's just pushing for a charging policy. Today is about air quality, a motion on air quality. It's full council's right and duty to actually make a decision about that, seeing as the core subject of difference seems to be whether we put up air quality charging or not. And we in the Conservative group are opposed to that at this point in time. So I therefore recommend it stays with the full council and be decided today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Count. So just to remind colleagues, we are going to go to a vote on Councillor Harrison's motion, which was to move the effect of Councillor Count's motion to the General Purposes Committee, not to the GCP. I'll now move to electronic.
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the motion from Councillor Harrison, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the motion from Councillor Harrison, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross. Chairman, I am now closing the vote. The result of the vote... Chairman, I've closed the vote. The result of the vote is 20 votes in favour, 28 against, no abstentions. The motion from Councillor Harrison is therefore lost, and we will record in the minutes that you pressed the wrong button.
Thank you, Mrs. Rowe. We now move to the debate on the original motion as proposed by Councillor Kane. With the appeal from me, please be brief and non-repetitive. Thank you. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Count said that this is a motion about air quality, and yes, that is what it says. However, the impact of some of the proposals in this motion is to potentially improve air quality at the expense of worsening congestion. The whole point of the amendment which failed and our approach to this debate is that there are a number of very important interrelated factors, and trying to treat one of them, air quality, in isolation will have unexpected and unwanted consequence for others. I want to pick up a few particular issues with this motion and with some of the comments that have been made. It has been said, and I think it's important to reiterate, that this motion, by allowing electric vehicles to use bus lanes, or proposing to consult on that, and by lobbying to give free parking for electric cars in City Council car parks, will recongest Cambridge at a time when it needs reduced congestion. The number of electric vehicles may be comparatively small at the moment, but it will increase and increase very rapidly. And to increase electric vehicles using the bus lanes, clogging up the public transport network, will do nothing to assist the problems that Cambridge already has. I note with interest that while the council is now placing itself not as a partner but as a lobbyist, lobbying the City Council about free parking in City Council car parks, it says nothing at all about addressing the on-street car parking charges that are under its own control and influence, which is rather interesting. A number of things that Councillor Hunt said were of, as always, constant fascination. Yes, it's important to listen to people, but it's also important to have evidence. And I think if there's one thing we've been short of in other matters on the last 3.5 years, it's been evidence. We have evidence being gathered by the GCP, and it's important to listen to and respect that evidence. I have to remind Councillor Hunt, who represents a neighbouring division to mine in East Cambridgeshire, that the Citizens' Assembly, which looked at this, included 1/3 of its number from residents outside the Greater Cambridge area. They also suffer congestion, but for many of them there is no alternative. I've heard from 2 people in the last 10 days in my division who responded to the Combined Authorities bus survey, were invited to come and talk about bus issues, and the invitation that was extended to them, as people without their own transport, required 2 buses to get to the meeting, which would finish at a time after which there was no bus to enable them to get home again. Those are the kind of public transport deficits that we suffer, and that is an issue for people in East Cambridgeshire, in Fenland. We can't just see this as an attempt to separate out the Greater Cambridge area from the rest and assume that the rest are unhappy. The rest of our population, many of whom are in the divisions represented by Councillor Hunt and myself, want public transport and see no evidence that they are going to get it in anything like the short or medium term. Yes, we need a carrot as well as a stick, but there is currently no carrot. And the proposals being considered by GCP at the moment would provide a carrot, not waiting 11 years to be able to drive your car to the nearest CAM metro point, which is not in East Cambridgeshire or Fenland. And people who can't afford to live in Cambridge have no buses, many of them, and have no access to CAM metro, as I've said. And Councillor Hunt mentions that we are fighting to charge people to go to work. I repeat the reference to the letter from Claire Ruskin and from Phil Allmendinger, who say that the leader has said that congestion charging and variations of it, such as intelligent charging and air quality charging, have been repeatedly pushed forward by Labour and Liberal Democrat group representatives who sit on the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Conservatives have steadfastly opposed these measures. They go on to say, representatives of the councils, the universities and businesses in the region have been analysing the requirements and the options for helping improve quality of air and reduce congestion. We haven't made decisions and we have not seen this pushing forward by one side, nor steadfastly opposing by another side. As far as we have seen, we have been through a number of years pretty well aligned, so accusations at this point do feel like trying to make a party political point. That is an utter condemnation, and I do hope that even at this late
Councillor
moment...
Dupre, you have a red light. Could I ask you please to sit down?
Okay.
Thank you.
Stakeholders are asking you to reconsider. Employers want solutions. Do it.
Colleagues, I think it's 4 more speakers have shown. We now have 5. I'm going to close the list now. I believe we have debated this particular motion and its amendments for long enough now, and I am very conscious of the time in other meetings. So I am not taking any more, I'm not adding any more to the list. So I have Councillors Bailey, Challenge, Jones and Harrison, and then I'm going to move to the seconder and the proposer. So, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to address a couple of things that have been said. I'm very pleased for Councillor Kavanagh's residents who can now park their cars easily and availably outside their houses with no problem and no interference from people from outside of the area. They're very lucky. But actually what that says to me is that, and that they're very pleased that no one else is bothering to park there now because they're not allowed to. But actually what that says to me is that the Queen's Highway is being excluded from people outside the area who need to get into the area to work and visit and other activities. I'm not a fan of residents' parking schemes. Roads are not owned by local residents. They're owned by taxpayers of the whole area and available for use by taxpayers of the whole area. And if people want to be able to park their cars, they should make alternative arrangements, not rely on other taxpayers to do so. And I wonder what his residents might think when they have to start paying £10 a day to actually get in their car and move it away from the parking space that they're privileged to have. It will be interesting to see what they think to that idea. It's very easy when you've got your own car in the middle of Cambridge and you're allowed to use it freely. That's great, but what about the rest of the people that need to access Cambridge? This motion is about air quality, not congestion. It seems to be utterly hijacked, and Conservatives believe in delivering solutions to the issues first before penalising people and charging and punitive measures. And I think what's a real shame is that the debate has been hijacked by other things, and that the quality of the motion and the other measures that we want to investigate and put forward. And Councillor Dupre has even said that apparently there are no other carrots and we might as well stop all working on the other carrots. I'm aware that there's a huge bus review going on, and we're doing a huge amount of work in East Cambridgeshire as we speak, and going out to consult with our residents on how we can get a better deal for rural areas. And the Combined Authority has been very vocal in saying that it wants a better deal on buses for rural areas. So, it's not that there are carrots to be had and we need to fight for them. And Councillor Dupre seems to be saying that because we haven't got a carrot, then we need to wield the stick. Well, I completely disagree with that. This motion includes a lot of measures to investigate and some to implement around energy solutions, so heating schemes, energy production solutions, last mile delivery, increasing the green canopy, measures to take up low emission vehicles, improving alternatives to the private car, reducing air pollution at source. I think there's a huge amount in there that should be proud about, and I would be staggered if the opposition voted against this, because we are asking for the more draconian solutions to be looked at after the right measures have been put in place and the incentives have been put in place and the alternatives have been put in place. You cannot stop residents that I represent and the outlying areas outside of Cambridge getting in and using Cambridge until you provide them with a proper alternative. It's completely and utterly unacceptable. So Conservatives believe in giving people proper incentives and alternatives first. And I want to remind everybody that this motion is about air quality. It's not about congestion charging.
Councillor Whitehead.
I just want to make two brief points, Chair, which arise from what people have been saying. First of all, I don't think anybody would disagree that what we need is a better public transport system. Councillor Hunt made this point very strongly. May I point out that your government, you have been in power since 2010, and what have you done about public transport system across the country? Very little. I could be much ruder about it, but I will simply say very little. There has been little attempt to produce viable public transport systems anywhere. Secondly, I'd like to point out to Councillor Bailey that the residents in residence parking schemes pay for residence parking schemes. It can be in some cases as much as £92 a year for your residence parking permit, and you pay for visitors. And that money goes into improving highways generally across this county. The amount of money that is generated from those schemes is used productively in other areas. And I would also like to say that the residence parking scheme is just one of the policies that are supported by people who work for the county council in trying to look at issues of congestion. So it's not just about residence parking schemes, it's about all sorts of things and it's just one of the many measures that people are trying to bring in to encourage greater use of public transport. And there is therefore a cost to the people who live in Cambridge of residence parking schemes, many of which, as Councillor Cavan has said, people are willing to support. I live in one of the areas that have the first of the residence parking schemes, and I am, along with many other people, happy to pay the amount of money to help improve highways and other things in other parts of the county. And finally, you cannot separate out, as many people have said, but the point doesn't seem to be getting across, you cannot separate out air quality from congestion and other issues.
Councillor Shellings.
Thank you, Chairman. Many of the points that I wish to make have already been made, so in the interest of expedition, I will pass.
Thank you, Councillor Shellings. I'm sure the council appreciates that point. Councillor Jones.
I'm afraid I can't be quite so indulgent. There has been a comment about a hijacking claim, although it seems every time that the other side talks about congestion, that's air quality, and every time this side talks about congestion, it's congestion. So I find that a bit bizarre. I've got 8 questionable statements here. 8 questionable statements. Fenland air quality is better and other areas haven't done enough. If you look at the Public Health England stats for air pollution effects, they show more deaths, 54, and higher levels of life lost, 562, in Fenland than many other parts of Cambridgeshire. Huntingdon is higher too, linked to the A14. Second questionable statement, air quality charging and congestion in an air quality motion are draconian charging solutions. An evidence-free statement depends on how or what is charged. 7 cities, major cities across the UK, have introduced clean air zones for 2020 or 2021, and many others are consulting. Third questionable statement, they are a distraction, not a solution. Well, look at the NICE, National Institute of Health and Social Excellence Guidelines 2016, which recommends clean air zones, restrictions on polluting vehicles, plus shifting the mode through congestion charge. That's public health guidance. Fourth questionable comment, they alienate the public. We talked about citizens' assembly, we talked about the better choices for journeys, we talked about what's happening in lots of other cities. 5% of deaths across Cambridgeshire are caused by air pollution. They increase social inequality. Next questionable statement. That depends on how they're implemented. For example, in Birmingham, my old city, has got plans to give financial support to enable poorer families, lower income families, to upgrade vehicles if they need to use them. So you can do things. It depends on how they're implemented. Sixth questionable statement. City trees are a technologically advanced green canopy air quality solution. Completely evidence-free statement. The only positive evidence about these trees, which by the way cost £20,000 each, comes from the manufacturers' claims themselves. They have been tried in a big city like Glasgow and they've been pulled because they failed. Seventh questionable statement. Electric vehicles should be allowed in bus lanes. This promotes inequality. Who are the people who are going to buy electric vehicles first? They're going to be the wealthy people of Cambridgeshire. They'll be able to buy electric vehicles and drive into bus lanes, slowing down bus travel for poorer people. Final questionable statement, although I'm sure there are some more lurking there. Electric vehicles should get free parking in city car parks, but it promotes inequality. And by the way, I see no mention there of pay and display, only city car parks. The whole thing is a stitch-up, my friends.
Councillor Harrison, in the hope that
Yeah,
your
very
neighbour's
quickly.
generosity is rubbed off on you.
Very quickly, Chair. Yeah, I mean, these points are so important, and it just shows why it is that this is not the right forum to take big and complex decisions in this way. It's just absolutely hopeless. Just to add one more statistic is that Councillor Tierney's quite right, of course, to pull me up and to remind me that people enjoy driving their cars. Absolutely, they do, and they're important, and I enjoy mine too. I mean, I need my car, and I absolutely am with you there. But it's about adding choice. This is about adding choice, not taking away choice. And the reason is that if you raise a pool of money on an annual basis forever and ever and a day that can be paid for subsidising buses, it adds choice. And that's really important because 49% of the lowest income, the group of people who are in the lowest, the quintile of the lowest income group, 49% of those people do not have access to a car. In the next quintile up, the figure reduces a bit. In the next quintile up, it reduces further until you get to the top quintile, the top income quintile, when, actually, if people haven't got a car, it's probably because they're living in Buckingham Palace or something and don't need one, I mean, but the point, it does remain, statistically, it is the case that the poor, many of whom are disabled or elderly or young, for that matter, many of those groups are the most deprived of good transport choices because of our dependence as a culture on the car. We need to add choice. As Cambridgeshire Head said in their letter, no other source of revenue funding, solid, large-scale revenue funding, has ever been identified in this country that could pay for the kind of transformation of the bus service that we want. I don't want a congestion charge. I think it's a crappy idea, but I'll put up with it if my money that I sometimes pay, when I sometimes pay a charge, rather than go on the bus, when I sometimes make that choice that it's important enough for me to do, I will be paying for me to be able to get a bus tomorrow, and for people who can't afford a car to get a bus tomorrow. This is a community endeavour, a pooling of money like we do with the NHS, like we do with all payments that we make into our society, that we choose to make. It's not just a draconian knee-jerk thing, and it may not be the right thing to do, because if we can't get all the ducks in a row with it and make it right and make it fair, we will all pay. There will be no exclusions in the city. There will be nobody's going to get one over on anybody else. I will pay most, not least, because I live in the city centre where I can't escape using it if I want to use my car. No shop can be got to without me having to pay it, and my residents. We're not being selfish about this. Far from it. We see that there is a big prize potentially to be won, and we need to look at the facts and the statistics before we damn it. And I just don't think that those facts and that understanding is there yet, because the one group, funnily enough, it's not the public, it's not the businesses, it's not the stakeholders, the one group that really hasn't been through a process like the Citizens' Assembly is us. And we could do with 2 weekends solid, whatever they spend, 40, 50 hours, understanding what the nature of the range of transport problems is, for whom, and what the possible range of solutions is. We need to go into that big tent. I'm willing to give up 2 weekends of my time to do a Citizens' Assembly with you. Are you prepared to do that with me?
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Hudson, as the seconder, you have the right to, you've reserved your right. If you wish to speak, hopefully with a reduced passion. No,
it won't be long, Chair. It won't be long. It's been amazing, isn't it? Greater Cambridge Partnership this, Greater Cambridge Partnership that. It used to be called the City Deal, then they changed the name to Greater Cambridge Partnership because, let's not forget Little South Cambs. Well, perhaps we should have kept it as the City Deal, because all South Cambs gets out of the Greater Cambridge Partnership is some cycle paths, which I've had myself. which I thank them for profusely. And the other one is, and I'm going to quote loosely, but I have the real quotes in my little book, quote from the Greater Cambridge Partnership, saying that the people of Cambridge deserve better health, the people of Cambridge are entitled to breathe good air, and the people of Cambridge are entitled to live longer. So when I said, well, how are you going to do that? He said, we're going to move all the cars out of Cambridge. I said, where are you going to put them? And they said, we're going to have rural travel hubs. And where are they going to go? I'll give you one guess. The little villages in South Cambridgeshire, innocent little Oakington, right by the primary school on a little lane, they want to build a rural travel hub. Well, no, it's not good. It's not good. It's okay for the people of Cambridge to breathe good air, so we'll throw all the cars to a little ineffectual village on the peripheral of this city. No, we've got buses. We've got buses. We don't want extra cars. We don't want your cars. We don't want your cars, Nicola. We don't want anybody's cars. We've got enough cars of our own. Anyway, moving on, Chair, please, if I may. Yes, I second this motion, particularly as Health Committee Chair, because air quality is one of our key concerns and is a key concern of all the members of the Health Committee. Public Health England analysis has shown that air pollution is now the most important environmental cause of early deaths, which therefore makes it everybody's business. The research evidence base for real-life interventions to improve air quality is developing, and Public Health England's rapid evidence review makes it clear we are still learning exactly what works best. The Health Committee sponsored a conference on air quality in June 2018, where we brought together organisations and community representatives from across Cambridge and Peterborough to understand the developing research and the causes of harms of air pollution and the contributions we can make to tackling them. Our Health Committee prides itself on a cross-party consensus on key issues. And while not all our committee members might agree on the detail of interventions we should put in place, we should all agree that this council should be discussing and, more importantly, acting on air quality as a priority, as well as the measures to directly reduce emissions through the incentives of the use of electric vehicles. If I had a choice of 10 vehicles parked outside my house, I'd go for 10 vehicles or 10 gas-guzzling vehicles. I'm going to go for the 10 vehicles with electric, please. Then the air will be much nicer and much breather. And if I can park for nothing, you bet your arm I'll buy an electric car. Anyway, through the incentives to the use of electric vehicles, we know that several of the actions put forward in this motion will have wider benefits for health and well-being. Active travel, as we know, through walking, cycling and using public transport, which is reliable, clean, affordable and viable, will have significant benefits for people's health and increasing the amount of exercise they take, whilst increased exposure to green space, which Cambridge has a lot of green space, I don't know whether you noticed, and trees has a positive effect on mental health, proven positive effect on mental health. Going on now to the other bit, the part of the motion that's somewhat controversial to some, it is opposition to charging. This isn't about charging, as has already been said, it's about clean air. I'm quite clear in my own mind that the impact of charging on people who may already be on low incomes and cannot afford to live in Cambridge but need to enter the city to work is of genuine concern. And any form of charging could make health inequalities worse, the very thing we're fighting to get better. And therefore, I believe it is just not acceptable at this present time. The Public Health England review of interventions to improve outdoor air quality and public health states that the public sector should lead by example, and our ambition to make improvements of our own fleet and encourage change of those we contract with is a good, practical and effective way of doing this. In summary, Chair, through you, thank you, this motion addresses an important public health issue, which is a key concern not only to the course of the Public Health Committee, all members of this authority, and it puts in place actions, not words, actions, and I strongly recommend it to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Councillor Count, do you wish to exercise your right to reply shortly?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to touch on a few things. A Citizens' Assembly been mentioned a lot of times. Nobody's mentioned their top answer. Their top answer was cut roads in Cambridgeshire, to sever them. That was the number one response from the Citizens' Assembly. Somehow, I know that isn't popular with Cambridge residents. It's not popular with actually residents outside as well. But when it was originally mooted back in 2014 or whatever, there was almost a riot in Cambridge City. But nobody mentioned that today whilst they were spouting Citizens' Assembly this and Citizens' Assembly that. They never mentioned the number one answer. But I want to talk to you now about evidence-based and the way you can get and produce evidence. Citizens' Assembly, one of their top answers was, do you want a single authority in charge of transport? Very high scoring answer that, very high scoring. Sorry, I missed the full question. It was, do you want one authority in charge of transport? Cambridge, transport for Cambridge. That's how you get answers, that's how you follow an evidence base, not transport for Cambridgeshire, not even in a GCP assembly, transport for Greater Cambridgeshire, Great Cambridge, transport for Cambridge. That, for me, is a way that evidence needs to be questioned at every single stage. I totally agree with Councillor Dupre, and you'll be pleased to hear this one, Councillor Dupre. There is a public transport deficit, and I'm aware of that, and it needs recognition and it needs solving. But today's motion, as we say repeatedly, was about air quality. And, you know, the jump from that to you're going to solve the buses in Sutton on the back of this policy going one way or another, it's simply that link is not there. But I do take exception to Councillor Whitehead's comments about what has the Conservative government done since 2010 till now about public transport. The Conservative government took over from a broken economy that you'd left in tatters. I'd spent all the money. That was the message. You brought in national politics. I didn't intend to, but let's say it as it was.
Councillor,
It's taken 10 years.
Councillor Whitehead, are you standing on a point of order, could you wait for the microphone? Point of, sorry.
There's no point of information.
Before you continue, Councillor Whitehead, unfortunately, when people are talking across me, I can't always hear what you're saying. You said a point of information. There is no such thing in this council as a point of information. There's a point of order or a point of personal explanation. That is neither. So could I please ask you to sit down? It better be, otherwise I will have to. I don't know how I stop you talking, but I'll try.
As the elections were brought into it, I just wish to contradict Councillor Count. When the Conservatives took over in 2010, the economy was...
It's not a point of personal explanation. But as it's Christmas, you've got away with it. Councillor Count, you may continue.
So as I was quite correctly saying, the Labour Party destroyed the economy up until 2010, to which the Conservatives have been busily trying to repair it for the last 10 years, and last 9 years, and we're starting to see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. But what has the Labour Party done? Well, I'll tell you what the Labour Party did. The Labour Party went to the public and they outlined what they would do with things such as public transport, such as nationalising the railway. And you know what the public thought of that? No. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, we're still hearing it's a good idea.
Yeah.
You're speaking to avoid.
Brilliant idea.
Yeah. We get told a lot today that
Colleagues, relevance, please.
Thank you. I'm saying this is about air quality. It keeps getting dragged back to congestion. Then we try and defend the points about congestion, and then we're pulled up. Why is it all right for you to mention congestion, but not us? Because we have to answer the points you've raised, and then remind you, today is about air quality. It's a policy on air quality. So let's vote on that today. Let's vote what's in front of us, not what people are speculating this may or may not be about. Inaccurate information. I hate to see inaccurate information. So the city trees, there was an evidence base put in the policy document. You can link to it. You've been to the site, apparently, because you said that's the only evidence base there is. So 2 trees in Glasgow City were removed. So therefore, city trees do not work. Well, I'm sorry, that's just not right information, because it's only one part of the picture. What about the 50 cities across Europe that are using them, that aren't removing them? Where is the other half of the evidence? We keep talking about evidence base, but when you only use part of it to get your point of view across, it's not a fair examination of the evidence base. So there's a lot of guilt going on. Excuse me, I'm getting a little bit worked up. And, you know, at the end of the day, Christmas is round the corner. This debate has already been won by this side. We know where the vote's going to go. So I just want to end up on more of a calm note and a considering note. We are working, not just myself, but the whole of the organisation, are working with the Combined Authority and the GCP to find the solution for the people of Cambridge, Greater Cambridge and all of Cambridgeshire, all right? This is one thing about air quality and that. I've been to a workshop recently which was attended by, I don't know, 20 people with the GCP. We're examining the evidence base. We've got another 2 coming forward of us trying to work together. We don't all agree on everything, but we are trying to work together to get there. So I'd just like to say Merry Christmas to one another.
Thank you. I think we better have an electronic vote on this. Mrs. Rowe.
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the motion, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the motion, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with the cross.
We still have one member. That's it.
Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. The result of the vote is 25 votes in favour, 14 against and 1 abstention. The motion is therefore carried.
Thank you, Mrs. Rowe. That finally concludes the discussion of the motions. And thank you, if I could be controversial, to the Remainers. We now move on to questions. It's item 13. Cambridge questions are... I'm losing the will to live here. Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee oral questions, which will be dealt with in accordance with the protocol set out in Annex 1 of Part 4.1 of the Council Procedure Rules of the Council's Constitution. Members have received a copy of this annex in their pigeonholes. Can you please raise your hand if you wish to ask a question? Please do not press the microphone button, as I will not be using the electronic list of speakers. I will invite you to press the microphone button when it is your turn to speak. The generic report summarising the decisions made by the Combined Authorities formal committees is included on the Council's agenda on pages 116 to 138. The maximum time will be 20 minutes, but gosh, I hope we don't need to stop that. Right, can I now invite members to ask questions of the Council's representative on the Combined Authority, Councillor Count. Thank you. Can I now invite members to ask questions of the Council's representatives on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillors Connors and Scott? No questions? Great, thank you. Item B is written questions under the Council's Procedure Rule 9.2. We move on to written questions. There are no questions. We're notified by the deadline. That concludes the business on the agenda for today. Can I, before you go, just before you all disappear, don't forget to both take a weight off your mind and off your pockets by donating to the charity East Anglia Children's Hospices. And happy Christmas and a happy New Year to you all.